Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Madison Sparrow. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, United States. She is the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige. In her family, Madison has older sisters Wendelin. Wendelin, who was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, is Madison's older sister from her father's previous relationship. The family later settled in Newark, Newcastle County, Delaware. On October 5, 2010, her family welcomed a new member, baby Molly. Madison loves children and often takes on the role of the eldest in the family, which includes 8 cousins. She enjoys doing things that make people happy and frequently spends time playing with children or participating in entertainment shows such as magic shows. It is easy to catch Madison in a happy moment. Her laughter is contagious, showing her youthful and cheerful spirit. However, Madison can also be thoughtful and dreamy at times. Madison's father said that since she was a child, she has displayed her wisdom through careful observation and reflection before making decisions. Additionally, she is a very emotional person. Her warm hugs can uplift anyone's mood. For her friends and family, Madison is always a reliable confidant who genuinely cares about the happiness of those she loves. Madison is a curious girl who loves to explore new things, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, an organization for girls around the world. By the fall of 2012, all the Girl Scout troops were full, but thanks to her mother's efforts, Madison was able to join a group. Madison's mother led a new Brownies troop, and Madison joined at age 9. In recent years, Madison has become one of the top cookie sellers, winning numerous medals for her impressive sales. She has been involved with the Girl Scouts for nearly 10 years, during which time she has built a strong network of friendships. Currently, Madison volunteers with her younger SI. Stir Molly's troop, as she enjoys working with other young people and making a positive impact on their lives. Madison is a kind and generous girl who acts with commitment to her faith in God and service to her country. She is passionate about helping others and strictly adheres to the principles of the Girl Scouts. However, like any other young girl, Madison also enjoys spending time having fun and living life to the fullest. Even in her teenage years, she is always the life of the parties. She often plans parties with her friends, ranging from movie nights to full-blown beauty parties with manicures and pedicures. Madison frequently stays up all night, so it is not unusual for her to struggle to wake up by noon the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met Annika Stalczynski, a girl her age who was born in Newark on July 9, 2003. They quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Annika's life is limited, but it is known that her parents are Robert Stalczynski and Robin Kars. In 2004, her family lived on Arona Mink Drive in Newark. After finishing elementary school, Annika and Madison went to middle school, where they made a new friend named Noah Sharp. Noah, a native of Newark, was born on August 23, 2001. Little is known about Noah's family and background, except that his mother, Nikki Sharp, has 2 other children, David and Brianna. The trio often went out for ice cream or spent time in the large green spaces around the city. When Noah and Madison met by chance, they felt an attraction to each other, and after just a few months, a teenage romance developed. At first, they were madly in love, but in early 2020, after more than a year together, Madison decided to break up with Noah without providing any reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends, but Noah was heartbroken because he still loved her deeply. During this time, Annika became Noah's trusted friend. They began to see each other more often and text almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, he began dating another girl after a while. Despite his relationship with Annika, Noah kept in touch with Madison. He visited Madison on her 17th birthday, September 12, 2020, and brought her a gift. It seemed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Annika learned about her boyfriend's meeting with his ex-girlfriend, she felt jealous. She could not accept that he was still friends with his ex. Noah's sadness also turned to anger. He wanted to hurt Madison because he felt hurt. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Annika and Noah began planning to end Madison's life. They exchanged text messages, used FaceTime, and met in person to discuss weapons and how to dispose of the body after the crime. The messages they sent each other while planning the attack were horrifying and revealed their intention to cause Madison great pain. Annika made several suggestions, including using a knife to inflict severe damage to her heart. They also discussed the possibility of using a handgun or another blunt object. According to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of a handgun because it would make too much noise. Although Noah was not entirely confident, they decided to use a blunt object. During their discussions, they calculated the number of bricks they would need to hold Madison's body underwater if they decided to dump her there. When in doubt, one idea was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find a shovel. Eventually, they came up with what they believed was the perfect plan. Madison was an ice cream lover and also cherished Halloween. She eagerly awaited October each year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Throughout the month, Annika had been studying Madison's interests and taking advantage of them. On Friday, October 2, 2020, she called Madison to ask her out for ice cream and to spend a day together. Madison agreed because she hadn't seen her friend in a long time and also wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was just 3 days away. That day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, a blue sweatshirt that said New Jersey, and white ghost earrings. She rarely wore jewelry, especially earrings, but since she didn't have much time to prepare for Halloween, Madison decided to buy these earrings to match the holiday. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to her mother, Heather, promised to see her later, and then left. Although nothing unusual happened at that time, the events that followed were extremely unsettling. That was the last time her mother saw her alive. Just hours later, Heather began receiving abusive text messages from Madison's phone number, along with information suggesting that Madison was supposed to be leaving the country. Heather thought it was a joke. She replied and wished Madison good luck in her endeavor, joking that she had forgotten to bring her passport, which was in the safe. However, Heather received no response. Even when she called her daughter, no one answered. Heather, who was hanging out with Molly and taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons, was confused. The lack of response began to worry her. Heather decided to call Annika, knowing that they would meet later in the day. When Annika answered, she burst into tears and explained that Madison had insulted her and that she had dropped her off near a store. Annika then suggested contacting Noah, but he did not respond. Frustrated, Heather asked Annika to contact Noah again. The three of them chatted but did not get any information. Frustrated, Heather decided to go home. On the way home, Heather received several messages from her daughter's friends, who had also received strange messages and wanted to know what was going on. When she got home and did not search for any clues, Heather found no signs that her daughter had run away. Even the money she had received for her birthday, her clothes, and her Redick cards were in her room. These messages were strange and nonsensical. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without a bag containing her clothes and money. When Madison did not return home at around 8:30 p.m., Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite repeated attempts to reach out to people, all her efforts were in vain. After being informed of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. Furthermore, she notified Madison's father, with whom she had divorced, who now lived in Colorado. He quickly shared the information on social media, calling for help in finding his daughter. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, the search for Madison, 17, who was reported missing, continued. Delaware State Police issued a yellow alert to activate all necessary procedures to search for missing persons. Over the course of 2 days, police search teams, family and friends searched farms near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen. The media also disseminated information about the search, asking people to come forward with any details. Delaware State Police have begun questioning Madison's friends, and evidence points to her ex-boyfriend as a suspect. According to information, the girl went to the woods in Newark behind the elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she went missing. Detectives then detained and questioned him for nearly 9 hours from October 4th to 5th, but he claimed he had no idea what had happened. He eventually confessed to his actions and revealed that Annika was an accomplice. He explained that Annika hated Madison because she was jealous of their relationship. He also shared his deep feelings about breaking up with her. According to Noah's testimony, he drove Madison to the woods behind the elementary school, then hid behind the bushes with an aluminum baseball bat. As Madison happily walked along the trail, he suddenly emerged from his hiding place and hit Madison twice in the head. Noah admitted to putting all his strength into the second blow, adding that it was then that he became enraged after months of losing control over the girl who had broken his heart. Unable to control himself, he continued to strike her body multiple times. After the attack, the two used Annika's car to transport her body to a location near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, about 15 minutes away from the scene and near a warehouse. Once there, they attempted to drown the body in the river. Unsuccessful, they opted to bury it in a shallow grave they dug in the same location. Armed with detailed information from the suspect, investigators carefully searched the designated area. There, they discovered an aluminum baseball bat used as a weapon, with traces of blood. The crime scene also revealed the victim's clothing, with some items showing evidence of having been burned. The suspect then led law enforcement to a large plot of land near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, where he and his accomplice had secretly buried the body. On Monday, October 5, 2020, Corporal Heather Piper announced the discovery of Madison's body. The news sent shockwaves through the victim's family, friends, and community. Several days later, on Saturday, October 9th, hundreds gathered at the high school football field to remember and honor Madison. An autopsy revealed that Madison died from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found the DNA of Noah and Annika on physical evidence collected at the scene and where the bodies were found. Noah faces charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. He has been placed in a correctional facility on a $1 million bail. More than a month after the tragic event and after processing the necessary evidence, Annika, 17, was also arrested. She was indicted by a Newcastle County grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family has been struggling. Heather has repeatedly stated that the exact cause of her daughter's death may never be known. Although Noah admitted his guilt to the police, he did not plead guilty in his formal court filing. This has led to speculation that his defense attorney may argue that he was mentally unstable. In some cases, attorneys often attempt to defend their clients by referring to their mental health status. Similarly, during a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that Noah was being treated for schizophrenia and was under the care of a psychiatrist at the time of the murder. Noah's attorney confirmed that he had been injured in Chester County, Pennsylvania, about 3 weeks before the murder. The attorney explained that Noah had suffered memory loss and other problems as a result of the head injury. However, the attorney did not provide specific information about the cause and severity of the injury. In May 2021, Annika pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her attorneys negotiated with prosecutors, and Annika agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intention to kill Madison. Several people close to the victim had reported to the police about alter ego, Noah's alleged alter ego. However, prosecutors argued that Noah himself had disseminated this information, intending to use it at trial later as part of his plan to kill Madison. After 2 years of waiting, the defendant's trial began on October 20, 2022, in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called, primarily by Deputy Attorney General Matt Foley and an assistant prosecutor. The courtroom played hours of video recordings of Noah's interviews with state police detectives. Viewers heard Noah's changing story until he finally confessed. The defense tried to challenge this evidence, arguing that the police had interrogated their client for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that the detectives interfered with the interrogation, directing Noah to say what they wanted and forcing him to say it. However, most people viewed this as a last-ditch effort to justify the murderer in any way possible. The prosecution presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Annika, which they claimed showed that the two had planned the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense attempted to convince the court that someone else had control of the suspect's device and that he was not the one who contacted Annika. However, the testimonies of Noah's mother and brother contradicted each other several times when they were called to testify. Nikia stated that her son came home on the evening of October 2 without being wet. Meanwhile, David said that his brother was wet and looked like he had just come out of a swamp. Nikia reported that when her son arrived home, Annika came in and seemed normal. David, on the other hand, claimed that Annika came in angry and slammed the door. Prosecutor Matt Froley asked Nikia if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him, to which she replied no. However, prosecutors obtained a recording of a phone call that took place a month before the trial, in which the defendant and his mother discussed surveillance camera footage at the elementary school. During that conversation, Noah informed his mother that his face was not visible in the video showing him and Annika near the school an hour before Madison was murdered. His mother reacted with relief at this news. However, the video showed an African-American man of similar height and build to Noah, holding a baseball bat while walking into the woods with a girl. The defense questioned the defendant's relatives about the two injuries he allegedly sustained. The first was a head injury on September 13, 2020. The second was another unconfirmed injury he suffered after falling off his bike, just hours before his police interview on October 4. Noah's lawyers argued that these injuries could have caused dissociative amnesia, attempting to justify the statements he made to the police. The court considered the arguments of both the prosecution and the defense regarding the victim's injuries. Annika, the accused, gave a 3-hour testimony that supported the prosecution's arguments. During her testimony, she calmly explained that Noah had convinced her that Madison had talked badly about her behind her back. However, Madison's family and friends insisted that she had never spoken ill of her friends. After 8 days of trial and more than 250 pieces of evidence presented by the prosecutors, the jury took just 3 hours to reach its final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the jury's verdict was announced, neither Noah nor his mother showed any emotion. Noah simply reneged and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried tears of relief before leaving the courtroom. In Annika's case, When she was convicted, prosecutors stated that under Delaware law, she would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, since she was a juvenile at the time of the crime. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lisa Holm. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998 in a small town in Sweden. It is a peaceful place where she lives with her parents and older sister. Lisa is a kind, positive, and determined person. Even before finishing her studies, she decided that she wanted to go to Australia to study architecture. Lisa has also had a lot of experience traveling with her family, visiting many other countries. In the summer of 2015, when Lisa turned 17, she finally found her first job at a cafe about a 40-minute drive from home. During the first few weeks, her parents still drove her to work. However, not long after, her father decided to buy her a scooter so that she could get around on her own. Lisa had this type of driver's license before she turned 18, which is the age required to apply for a car driver's license. She was very happy to receive this gift because it was an opportunity for her to go to work by herself without having to rely on others. However, in the first few weeks, her father still accompanied her by car because Lisa lacked experience driving on the road. She only worked on weekends, and her father accompanied her every morning and evening. This habit continued until June 7th, when he finally allowed her to drive herself to the cafe. Around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together. That day, the cafe was quite crowded, so Lisa was very busy with work. She took a short break to have lunch with her parents, then they returned home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent a text message to her father saying that she was coming home. Just 3 minutes later, her father received a call from Lisa, but no one answered. He heard some voices in the background and thought that Lisa had accidentally called his number while talking to her colleague. He also heard the sound of a car door closing. He called Lisa's name several times, but no one answered. Then, he ended the call and started waiting for her to come home. However, she did not appear. After an hour, Lisa's parents began to worry. They thought something might have happened to her on the way since she should have arrived by now. This was the first time she had ridden a scooter alone, and her father was very concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was turned off. After waiting for a while, her father decided to set off, hoping to meet Lisa on the way because she could have taken the shortest route. Her father was afraid that Lisa might have had an accident, so he drove carefully, paying attention to the road but did not see his daughter. Finally, he went to the cafe but could not find Lisa. When he arrived at her workplace, he noticed that Lisa's scooter was parked in front of the building. At that moment, he panicked because he could not find his daughter despite having come all this way. When he saw her scooter, he immediately calmed down, thinking that maybe she was just late for work for some reason. However, there was no one in the cafe, and he noticed something else. Lisa's scooter key was still in the ignition, with a helmet dangling from the handle. These things made him believe that something was wrong with his daughter. She would never leave the key in the scooter while leaving it unattended in the parking lot. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother contacted the cafe owner, hoping to find clues about her daughter's whereabouts. However, the cafe owner claimed that he did not know where Lisa was. According to the cafe owner, Lisa had called the staff around 6 p.m. and they told her that they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got in his car and went to the cafe. On the way, the cafe owner also contacted 4 friends who lived nearby, asking them to help find Lisa. When the cafe owner arrived, they began searching both the cafe and the surrounding area. They hoped that Lisa might have decided to take the bus instead of the scooter. Lisa's mother and sister drove to the bus station in their town to check the schedule. Unfortunately, Lisa was not on the bus. Her family immediately contacted the police. It was dark. The police quickly expanded the search. The fact that Lisa's motorbike was left in the parking lot with the keys made them consider the possibility that Lisa had been kidnapped. Such incidents are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote rural area where she lived. Therefore, the police quickly mobilized teams with sniffer dogs, while other officers began knocking on doors near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and friends learned about her missing, they shared information about the case on social media, hoping to attract more attention and find witnesses. The search went on all night but yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police department announced Lisa's missing to the public and asked anyone with information to come forward. At the same time, a man working in a warehouse across the street from the cafe found a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives had checked the warehouse the night Lisa went missing but did not find the glove. They later showed the glove to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that it belonged to their daughter. This further strengthened the theory that Lisa had been kidnapped, and the police intensified their search efforts. By that time, news of Lisa's missing had captured the nation's attention, and hundreds of volunteers had joined the search. On Tuesday, the police received some alarming new leads. Volunteers searched the area around a dirt road a few hundred yards from the cafe. During the investigation of the crime scene, investigators collected several pieces of evidence related to Lisa, including a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. They later found other parts of the smartphone, Lisa's ID card, and several other receipts scattered along the dirt road. This evidence made the police almost certain that Lisa had been kidnapped. They mobilized every available resource for the search, and the number of participants grew. The case became a major news topic in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers from across the country joined the search. A local missing persons organization also joined the effort. The scale of the search for Lisa became the largest in the country's modern history, with more than 1,000 people involved in total. The police received numerous calls from people with information about Lisa's missing. One woman reported that before Lisa went missing, she had gone jogging. While she was jogging, a man standing next to his car stopped her and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. He spoke to her in English. She tried to give him directions using Google Maps, but he asked her to get in his car and show him the way using his navigation device. The woman found this request suspicious, so she refused and continued walking. She also told the police that she believed she had seen the man among the workers repairing a warehouse across from the cafe. Lisa's co-workers shared a testimony with the police. On the day of her missing, a witness noticed two men standing across from the coffee shop, looking in the direction of where she worked. The witness didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa went missing, they decided to share it with the police. The next day, Wednesday, Lisa's father and some friends searched the dirt road where her belongings had been found the day before. When they went a little further, they found Lisa's driver's license and house keys. This suggested that Lisa may have been abducted and forced to leave the coffee shop via this road. Her kidnapper may have thrown her belongings out of the car or other vehicle they used to abduct her. Police and volunteers focused their efforts in this area, but no other items were found. That evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from his search. As he passed the coffee shop, he noticed that the police had left the warehouse where Lisa's gloves were found. The man decided to go inside the coffee shop to look for any other clues. This time, he used his car's flashlight to walk around the premises since it was dark. While there, he noticed a shiny object lying on the floor. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a pair of women's earrings. The man later reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that the jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police then sealed off the shed and conducted a more thorough inspection. The lead detective explained that on the first day of the search for Lisa, the priority was to find her, so the shed had not been fully inspected, and they may have missed small items such as earrings. After conducting an in-depth investigation, forensic experts and sniffer dogs were called in. They discovered a remarkable piece of evidence hidden behind a wall, which was traces of human feces. Although it seemed unrelated to the case, forensic experts developed an hypothesis regarding it. When criminals commit serious and horrifying crimes, their bodies secrete a large amount of adrenaline, which can lead them to be unable to control their urge to urinate. This often happens to murderers, who frequently urinate before or during the crime. Based on the discovery of Lisa's gloves and earrings in the warehouse area, the police hypothesized that if she had been kidnapped, the perpetrator might have dragged her into this building. Therefore, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the kidnapper may have consumed a large amount of adrenaline, leading to an inability to control himself and necessitating urination at the scene. Consequently, fecal samples were taken and sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers went to a farm about 3.2 kilometers from the cafe. This farm complex consisted of large buildings where many people worked. The search team decided to check the entire area. However, after they arrived, two men appeared at the farm. They spoke no Swedish and only communicated in English. One of them claimed that the police had come to the farm to check on them. But the leader of the search party did not believe him, as he thought he would be notified if it were true. So he decided to continue searching. The two men walked around the farm, observing for a while before driving away. After about an hour, the search team discovered a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Upon closer inspection, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones. Police quickly arrived on the scene and confirmed that these items belonged to Lisa. They then sent forensic experts to the farm to conduct a more thorough investigation. The detectives heard stories about two strange men who tried to stop volunteers from checking the farm. The police also recalled a report about a woman who had encountered a man acting suspiciously while jogging and who spoke English. In fact, they had some idea of his identity from the very beginning of the search. They visited the houses surrounding the cafe. In one of the houses, two Lithuanian brothers lived with the wife of one of them. All three of them spoke no Swedish and communicated only in English. They were the only people within a few miles who did not speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked at the warehouse across the street from the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's helmet was found. They were familiar with these locations and the road leading to their house. Since there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all three of them. Forensic experts, along with volunteers, went to the farm to continue the investigation. They noticed an old trailer, surrounded by tall grass, that looked like it hadn't been used in years. However, the grass around the door was flattened, indicating that something had been there recently. In addition, the grass under the door was also matted down, indicating that the door had not been opened for a long time. When the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately hit by a strong stench of decay. Inside the trailer were several wardrobes, most of which had previously been used as changing rooms for workers. All but one were locked, leading experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each one and eventually discovered Lisa's body in an open cupboard, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the cupboard, the perpetrator had managed to squeeze the victim inside. Lisa had been tied up with a rope around her neck and duct tape wrapped around her head. Her pants had been pulled down, and her shirt had been pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa had died from strangulation, but no signs of sexual assault were found. All of her clothes were turned over to the lab for testing. As news of the discovery of her body spread rapidly across the country, headlines in Sweden focused on Lisa's abduction. When her body was found and the public learned of her brutal murder, the incident shocked the entire nation. Since such crimes are extremely rare in Sweden, everyone was taken aback that someone could commit such a brutal act. On the same day her body was discovered, something unusual and quite strange happened. A YouTube user came across a video posted 13 days before the murder, titled 13, which had a countdown timer. The most disturbing detail was that the name of the channel that posted the video was Lisa. News of this video quickly spread across the media, leaving many people stunned by the coincidence. Some began to speculate that someone had predicted the murder, but the truth was much simpler. Someone had likely changed the channel name and video title after discovering Lisa's body. This could have been to suggest another conspiracy theory or just a cruel joke. The police are trying their best to quickly find the culprit in this murder. When Lisa's body was discovered, investigators brought in the owners of the farm, Narajis, his brother and his brother's wife, for questioning. However, all of them denied any involvement in the case. They claimed that at the time of the kidnapping, they were at home together to provide each other with an alibi. According to their story, Narajis was sleeping in his room while his wife was preparing dinner and Narajis' brother was on the computer. Around 8 p.m., Narajis woke up and went to the gas station to buy pizza and cigarettes. The police had some doubts about the testimony of them, as they might have been protecting each other. Although the police collected their DNA samples, investigators still did not find direct evidence linking them to the murder case. Forensic experts worked diligently at relevant locations, such as the barn and the farm, using all available resources and manpower, and their efforts finally paid off. In the barn area, there was a small room resembling an office, with a large window overlooking the cafe. When examining this room, experts discovered 15 different male semen stains on the wall and floor near the window. This suggested that someone had stood there, observing the cafe staff, including Lisa. The collected semen samples were promptly sent to the laboratory, where experts extracted DNA profiles from these samples. The results of the DNA analysis showed that all 15 semen traces matched the DNA of Narajis. Additionally, fecal samples found in the barn also matched his DNA. In the adjacent room, which had previously been used to store cow's milk, forensic experts found a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of the strip matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Blood was found on the pipe, and DNA analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Narajis. On the floor near the pipe, they also found a piece of rope that matched the one on the pipe. Experts conducted tests and identified 2 DNA samples, Lisa's and Narajis's. This was an important step in the police investigation. They had connected the suspect to the rope used to kill the victim. Additionally, a strand of Lisa's hair was found in the room. Another crucial piece of evidence was Narajis's DNA found on her jacket. Based on this evidence, the police believed that Lisa had been murdered there. Police pieced together a similar sequence of events. Narajis had been observing the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he may have pretended to ask Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactic to trick her. Narajis may have then lured Lisa into his car to enter a route into the GPS system. Since Lisa was a kind person who always tried to help others, she may have agreed. Once she was in the car, the perpetrator covered her mouth and drove to a secluded place. At the scene, the perpetrator tied a rope around the victim's neck and hung her from a pipe. According to doctors, this action may have excited the perpetrator so much that he experienced an adrenaline rush, causing him to defecate on the spot. After the victim died, he placed Lisa's body in his car and drove to the farm, throwing her belongings out the window on the way. He hid the victim's body in the trailer's storage locker and covered it with old clothes. The entire process took less than an hour. Despite the overwhelming evidence, he maintained his innocence. His wife and brother were not involved and were released. They quickly left Sweden and returned to Lithuania. Preparations for the trial were intense. Narajis claimed that he had worked in that warehouse for a long time, so his DNA could have been present due to his work. Additionally, he had alibis from his wife and brother, although there were doubts about the reliability of both sources in court. This could work in his favor, although many uncertainties remained. However, the presence of Narajis's DNA on the victim's clothes could only be explained by his direct contact with her on the day of the murder. Furthermore, the police also found a witness who saw Narajis's car near the cafe just before and after Lisa's abduction. According to the witness, the car had traveled several times on the road between the cafe and the farm at a time when Narajis was believed to be asleep at home, according to his brother and his wife. After months of investigation, experts used the most advanced equipment to examine all the collected evidence. They found traces of Narajis's DNA on most of Lisa's clothing, including inside her underwear. With public interest piqued, the investigators continued to search for more clues that could influence the proceedings and strengthen Narajis's connection to the case. They traveled to Lithuania to speak with his wife and his brother again. The woman maintained that he had not left the house between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., but when his brother was questioned, the detectives quickly obtained the information they wanted. After presenting the man with all the evidence against his brother and the details of what he had done to the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to cooperate with the police. He claimed that Narajis was not home that night, returning only around 7:30 p.m. He looked dirty and immediately washed all his clothes. As the police began questioning all the residents and visiting their homes, Narajis whispered to his brother to tell the police that he had been home during that time. Narajis later explained that he was afraid of being charged with a crime he did not commit, as he was an immigrant and had no alibi at the time of the abduction. The brother truly believed his cousin was innocent, but after hearing all the evidence, he realized that his initial thoughts might have been incorrect. Lisa's funeral took place just a month after her murder. The church where the funeral was held could only accommodate 130 people, but many more came to say goodbye to her. The organizers decided to set up extra chairs and screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder and once again attracted national attention, placing everyone involved under a great deal of pressure. Narajis's lawyer claimed that his client's DNA could have been found on the victim's clothes because he had worked in the barn. However, the prosecutor argued that this explanation did not make sense, especially concerning Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there would be if he had touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer was unable to produce any concrete evidence to prove his client's innocence. Instead, he theorized that the real killer was Narajis's brother. According to this theory, the brother took multiple samples of Narajis's DNA and deliberately left them on the victim's body and at the crime scene to confuse the case. But this defense was quickly dismissed. The trial lasted a month, and Narajis was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in a high-security prison. Although in Sweden, this prison offers the same amenities as a 3-star hotel. The lawyer appealed but was rejected. In early 2017, Narajis himself applied to be transferred to a prison in his home country of Lithuania for reasons that remain unclear. Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than those in Sweden. Yet the court still accepted the defendant's request. After all, providing comfortable conditions of detention cost Swedish taxpayers hundreds of dollars per day per prisoner. That same year, Narajis appealed to the Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, his joy was short-lived. A few weeks later, the court overturned the decision, and Narajis was once again sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of returning to a comfortable cell in Sweden. 5 years later, In August 2022, Narajis was transferred to a prison in Lithuania. While other prisoners were being moved to another ward, one of them attacked and seriously injured Narajis, leading to his death on the way to the hospital. As for the suspect's wife, her involvement in the case has not been completely ruled out. The police stressed that it was almost impossible for her to be directly involved in the kidnapping or murder. If that were the case, experts would have found her DNA on the victim's clothes or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew about Narajis's crime and tried to help him escape punishment by providing a false alibi. Narajis's brother also raised questions. Cafe employees reported seeing two men standing near the barn and watching them. Assuming that one of them was Narajis himself, the other man could have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found in the barn or on Lisa's clothes, making it unlikely that he was involved in the murder. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kristen Rosam. Ralph and Constance Rosam were dedicated parents to their 3 children, prioritizing their kids' development and well-being above all else. Their children were educated from a young age, attended good schools, and they encouraging their children to explore their interests through a variety of extracurricular activities. However, their daughter Kristen struggled to cope with the pressure of living up to family expectations. Feeling overwhelmed and desperate to escape, Kristen began to rebel by lying, skipping school, and finding ways to escape her temporary problems. At first, she felt more comfortable when she drank alcohol, but over time, the effects of alcohol stopped being effective for her. As a result, she turned to the controlled substance methamphetamine and eventually became dependent on it. Methamphetamine, commonly referred to as meth, is widely considered the most addictive illicit substance in the United States. Its use often leading to paranoia, impaired judgment, and euphoria. Kristen's parents noticed her erratic behavior and, in a conversation, discovered she'd been struggling with the substance since high school. Her entire family, who were highly educated, were shocked and deeply affected by this behavior. After months of conflict with her parents, 17-year-old Kristen secretly ran away. While vacationing in Mexico with friends, she met a tall, handsome man named Gregory de Villers, who was 7 years her senior. Over time, they fell in love with each other. He helped her get settled and get her health back. With Gregory's support, she turned her life around by getting a job at the local forensic service as a toxicology assistant. Her skills impressed the employer and her addiction was forgotten. As a forensic assistant, Kristen graduated from college with honors. Her teachers and employers praised her and gave her the Best Student Award without knowing the reason why she loved her chosen profession. After 5 years of dating Gregory, they had their grand wedding on June 5, 1999. Kristen's parents loved Gregory dearly and were relieved that their daughter had overcome the pain of her past and was now on the path toward a bright and fulfilling future. In March 2000, Kristen was hired by the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office as a toxicologist, specializing in analyzing body fluids for narcotics. Gregory was working in the biotechnology industry at the time. But Kristen soon grew tired of her dull and monotonous life, and she began to look for excitement elsewhere. She met a new coworker, Michael Robertson, who had just been appointed as the department head. Although Michael was married, they unexpectedly developed strong feelings for each other. They couldn't keep their relationship a secret for long. Gregory discovered many love letters between his wife and Michael. The marriage relationship was getting worse, yet Gregory remained hopeful that it could be salvaged. Understanding his wife's weakness, he made an effort to support and rescue her from her difficulties, hoping to mend their relationship. This time Kristen did not want to be saved. She asked for a divorce on Monday morning, November 6, 2000. Kristen was getting ready for work as usual. Gregory was sick and at home. Kristen was very tired worrying about her husband. In the days after their breakup talk, he was indifferent and unusually calm. Kristen informed Gregory's workplace that he was sick, and then she also visited her husband during her lunch break. Gregory fell asleep at 9:22 p.m. That same day, Kristen called the emergency services to report that her husband Gregory was not breathing. He had most likely committed suicide as he was home alone. Kristen was crying on the phone and she lost her temper, so she did not listen to the dispatcher's instructions about performing an autopsy and performing first aid on her husband. Police and paramedics arrived at the scene at 10:19 p.m. Gregory was pronounced dead. He was lying on the bedroom floor with his torso exposed, surrounded by scattered rose petals. An examination of the room revealed evidence suggesting that Gregory taking a fatal amount of multiple prescription medications. Empty painkiller bottles were scattered around the room, and torn wedding photos were found on his bed. When questioned, Kristen said she told Gregory she wanted to separate the night before, just over a year after their wedding. She felt regret about the marriage, thinking they rushed into it too quickly. Kristen also found Gregory too controlling and she wanted more space. Gregory's death was initially ruled a suicide, caused by a powerful sedative. Kristen signed the cremation papers, but Gregory's family and friends were skeptical. They had noticed no changes in his personality or mood, and they believed he would never use those fatal drugs. The family's doubts led them to try to stop the cremation and request an autopsy. Their persistence eventually led investigators to consider the possibility that Gregory's death was not a suicide, but a murder. An investigation into Gregory's death revealed the fentanyl, a painkiller 150 times more potent than morphine, along with smaller amounts of other substances including clonazepam and trace. Initially, the cause of death was suspected to be an overdose of oxycodone, often referred to as heroin, but further investigation pointed to fentanyl as the lethal dose. A substance can provide pain relief and produce a feeling of euphoria. However, it can also slow down breathing and be fatal if not treated in time. Because of the strong effects of clonazepam and other substances found in Gregory's body, investigators speculate that someone else intentionally gave him a fatal dose of fentanyl. Kristen became the prime suspect due to her extensive knowledge and access to powerful prescription medications like fentanyl. During questioning, Kristen's disheveled appearance and history of substance abuse raised suspicions about her potential involvement in Gregory's death. Her own testimony revealed inconsistencies on the day her husband died. Initially, Kristen told medical staff that he was not taking any medications, but later changed her statement to suggest that he may have taken oxycodone at the hospital. The change in her story, combined with her knowledge and access to powerful prescription drugs, supported the argument that Kristen was involved in her husband's death. On November 8, the police received a call from Russ Lowe, a coworker of Kristen's. Russ revealed that Kristen was having an affair with her boss. Further investigation uncovered evidence of Kristen's relationship with her boss, Michael. This evidence consisted of affectionate emails and computer documents. Notably, the documents also revealed Michael's knowledge of phenyl, a substance that later became significant in the murder case. Kristen and Michael's relationship became a key aspect of the investigation. It is suspected that Gregory became a threat to Michael and Kristen because he knew that Kristen had access to the laboratory and that she had secretly used narcotics. Michael covered for Kristen, supporting her actions. During the investigation, Michael admitted to being aware of Kristen's drug addiction at the time. Although no charges were filed against Michael and Kristen, but they were both fired for violating several rules. Kristen's troubles started in January, when police searched her home for evidence of drug use. Initially, she was arrested but later released on bail. A new proof shed light on the investigation, Kristen's diary, uncovered during the initial examination. Kristen didn't write the diary for personal reflection, but rather as a way to present herself to others and maintain her innocence, while making her husband Gregory's death look like a perfect suicide. Notably, on the day of his death, Kristen bought a rose to pair with lingerie that suggested infidelity. A medical examination of Gregory's body revealed that he had been unconscious for at least 6 hours before his death. The estimated time of death was likely about an hour to an hour and a half before it was officially confirmed. Furthermore, bruises were found around the needle marks on his arm. During the investigation, a short supply of the lethal substance was discovered at Kristen's workplace, along with other narcotic substances. A suspicious vial of fentanyl was also found, leading police to suspect that Kristen had poisoned Gregory without his knowledge. Kristen was arrested on June 25, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After spending 6 months in custody, she was released on bail. The prosecution's main argument in her first trial centered around the motive for the murder. They claimed that Kristen killed Gregory to protect her reputation because he threatened to expose her drug addiction and her affair with Michael. The prosecution alleged that Kristen used a powerful synthetic opioid called fentanyl to poison Gregory. Fentanyl is 80 times more potent than morphine. It was suggested that Kristen initially attempted to kill Gregory with a different substance, clonazepam, but when this failed, she used fentanyl. To make it seem like Gregory had taken his own life, Kristen staged the scene by ripping out pages from her diary and placing personal items, including rose petals and a wedding photograph, around his body. As a biochemistry graduate, Kristen leveraged her knowledge of chemistry and drugs to orchestrate Gregory's death. The prosecution also claimed that Kristen deliberately withheld information about the fentanyl from her colleagues in the medical examiner's office, aiming to mislead them into believing Gregory's death was self-inflicted before his autopsy. The developments of what happened that day are reproduced as follows. On the morning of November 6, she contacted Gregory's workplace to report his absence, then headed to her workplace. Her colleagues stated that around 9 a.m., she began her workday. However, they recalled finding her crying in their Michael's office about an hour later. The manager of the apartment building where Kristen and Gregory were staying witnessed Kristen returning home at 12:10 p.m. Shortly after, at 12:41 p.m., Kristen went to a nearby grocery store and bought various items. Among these purchases was a credit card statement. This confirmed her emergence at the store several hours before Gregory's death. Additionally, Kristen made multiple phone calls to Michael. The San Diego County medical examiner, Dr. Blackburn, who performed Gregory's autopsy, testified that Gregory had been deceased for at least an hour by the time paramedics arrived. The examiner also disclosed that Gregory was suffering from early-stage bronchopneumonia at the time of death. Breathing difficulties occur when lung secretions accumulate, often as a result of poor breathing. This can happen when a person is unconscious or taking very shallow breaths. Dr. Blackburn presented additional evidence, stating that Gregory's body contained a significant amount of urine in his bladder at the time of death. This accumulation would have caused severe discomfort if Gregory was conscious, suggesting he likely struggled to breathe for 6 to 12 hours before his death. Furthermore, Dr. Blackburn found it unlikely that Gregory, in an unconscious state, could have scattered rose petals on himself. During the trial, Dr. Blackburn also testified that the level of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was not high enough to be considered an overdose, and therefore, would not have been the cause of death. Dr. Theodore Stanley, testifying for the prosecution, stated that fentanyl, a powerful and fast-acting painkiller, can have severe side effects leading to respiratory arrest. The onset of its effects varies, based on the administration method. The fastest method of maximal effect is intravenous administration, which occurs within about 5 minutes. Intramuscular injection results in maximum effect within 15 to 20 minutes. This is followed by oral administration, with maximum effect within 20 to 30 minutes. The slowest method of maximal effect is the transdermal patch, which takes about 16 hours. Dr. Theodore testified before the court that fentanyl is typically not taken orally because the liver breaks down approximately 65% of the substance. As a result, only 35% of fentanyl is able to enter the bloodstream. However, when questioned about how fentanyl was detected in Gregory's body, neither Dr. Blackburn nor Dr. Theodore was able to provide a clear explanation. Dr. Theodore found that the amounts of fentanyl in Gregory's body, combined with the fact that Gregory had been unconscious and breathing shallowly for hours before his death, suggested that the fentanyl may have been given to Gregory by someone else. During the trial, the prosecution had difficulty explaining to the jury exactly how Kristen poisoned her husband. However, there was evidence that she may have applied a fentanyl patch to Gregory's arm while he was sleeping. Kristen's former workplace provided a crucial piece of evidence, as 15 fentanyl patches were discovered missing from the lab. While Kristen maintained her innocence, her defense team accepted that fentanyl was the cause of Gregory's death, but they suggested an alternative explanation. According to the defense, Gregory intentionally gave himself a fatal dose due to feelings of desperation about family problems. In court, Kristen recounted her of events on the morning of November 6. She recalled waking up to find Gregory in a state of distress. Gregory called his employer at 7:42 a.m. to report his illness and informed them that he would not be going to work. Kristen claimed she left for work, but returned to their apartment during her lunch break to check on Gregory. When she asked him why he was so upset, Gregory replied that he was feeling unwell due to taking oxycodone and clonazepam and planned to stay home and rest. Kristen returned to work after that and came home around 8 p.m. Upon arrival, she found Gregory in bed and assumed he was asleep. She went to take a shower, and when came out, she tried to wake him, but when she touched him she felt cold. Kristen then immediately called emergency services. During questioning, the prosecutor questioned the validity of Kristen's explanation. She admitted to lying in the past and lying about her drug use, which made her testimony seem suspect. Autopsy and toxicology results showed that Gregory had been unconscious for approximately 6 to 8 hours before his death, contradicting Kristen's initial claim that they had lunch together that day. The defense argued that the concentration of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was not fatal on its own. However, they acknowledged that the combined effects of oxycodone, an opiate, and clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, could be more potent than the effects of either substance alone. They suggested that Gregory may have accidentally taken the drugs, but they could not explain why the high concentration of fentanyl was found in his body, which remains unexplained. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kristen guilty of first-degree murder and special circumstance murder due to poisoning. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kristen claimed innocence and appealed the verdict in the appellate court, where a critical mistake by her own defense team was discovered. Her lawyers had admitted that fentanyl caused the death but failed to test the autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites. This important test will help determine whether Gregory ingested fentanyl and whether the fentanyl in his body was due to contamination from laboratory testing rather than what he actually ate in. If fentanyl was only detected in the samples and not in Gregory's body, the prosecution's theory that fentanyl caused his death would be incorrect. The appeal also revealed a chain of custody violation regarding the samples. Although the samples were marked and placed in a cardboard box, the containers were not sealed. They were left at the medical examiner's office for approximately 36 hours before being shipped to the sheriff's forensic lab due to the recipient's absence. During this time, the samples were potentially accessible to anyone with a key to the medical examiner's office building, raising concerns that someone may have contaminated the samples. Kristen's appeal contends that any individual with a motive to falsify evidence could have added the substance to the sample. A panel of judges from the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed Kristen's case and concluded that her lawyers had made a serious error. The prosecution claimed Gregory died of a fentanyl overdose. Kristen's lawyers, however, did not contest that claim. Instead, they accepted the fentanyl overdose explanation. The judges did not overturn the verdict but sent the case back to the lower court to decide whether the defense's error could have changed the outcome of the trial. The U.S. Supreme Court has issued a ruling stating that federal courts must respect the decisions made by state courts in similar cases. This ruling impacts Kristen's case, as the court has voted against a hearing and her appeal was denied, leaving her in custody. Kristen's trial was not the only part of the case. She had a co-defendant named Michael. Although he was not in the U.S. for the trial, he is still a part of the case and risks being arrested if he returns. However, he may be eligible for a $100,000 bail. Michael has been living in Australia, where he works as a forensic toxicologist. Kristen Rosam was arrested in 2003 and received a life sentence without parole. Gregory's family is now suing the county for allowing Kristen to steal a lethal dose of the same drug without detection, and they blame the county's negligence for her crime. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jasmine Richardson. The Richardson family was widely admired for their friendly and hospitable personalities, which made everyone feel at home. Deborah, Mark, and their children, Tyler and Jasmine, lived in a cozy home. Their home is frequented by friends, and the family atmosphere is built on the principles of love and respect. However, things took a turn when Jasmine, their 12-year-old daughter, entered puberty. From a calm and obedient girl, she grew into a confident but also impulsive young woman. This new personality led to frequent conflicts with her parents and her academic performance started to decline. Jasmine's interests changed in a big way. She switched from listening to modern pop music to heavy rock. In addition, her fashion style is no longer the same as before. Gone were the bright colors and cheerful clothing. Instead, she opted for a darker, more somber style that was often provocative. It was clear that Jasmine was trying to attract the attention of boys, and she began to accentuate the curves of her body. Her interaction with friends noticeably decreased as she began spending more time alone in her room, often with the door closed, glued to her computer screen. After the internet became available at home, her interests shifted to exploring Gothic themes, reading dark poetry, learning about criminal psychology, and studying human anatomy. She also became fascinated with criminal psychology and the Wiccan religion, referring to herself as a witch. She connected with like-minded individuals through websites focused on similar interests, forming a community of friends who shared her passions. Her social media page featured the greeting, "Welcome to my tragic world." Jasmine's behavior, initially thought to be a sign of puberty, but late became more concerning as she began to distance herself from her family. She created a fictional online persona, gave herself a different name, age, and began seeking relationships with people much older than her. Her parents tried their best to support her during this difficult period, suggesting that they spend time together by participating in common activities. However, Jasmine found these suggestions uninteresting. Her relationship with her younger brother deteriorated as she started speaking to him less frequently, viewing him as an annoyance. In stark contrast, she spends hours talking to strangers on social media, building other relationships, to make up for her lackluster relationships with family and friends. Deborah and Mark were aware that their daughter's new hobbies were likely a temporary phase of her youth. As a result, they were patient and allowed her to explore her interests. When Jasmine asked to attend a punk rock concert, her parents agreed. If only they had known the consequences that would follow this outing. In early 2006, Jasmine attended a local concert by a youth band that shared her interests. She also knew that Jeremy Steinke, a boy who had caught her attention for months, would be there. They had met online through a website for vampire enthusiasts and occasionally communicated with each other. Jeremy created an online persona as a 30-year-old werewolf who craved blood. To support this claim, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, but the origin of the fluid was unknown. Despite his ambiguity, he seems to believe he is unique, a quality Jasmine finds appealing and interesting. Jeremy and Jasmine connection deepened after meeting at a concert. Jeremy, however, was 23 years old, and the duo knew her parents would not approve of their relationship due to their significant age difference. As a result, they decided to keep their romance a secret. Complications in Jeremy's life were made worse by problems he had experienced earlier. He struggled financially and resided in a trailer with his mother and sister. His relationship with his mother was strained, largely because of her heavy drinking. This often led to violent arguments with some of her hot-tempered partners, who often abused Jeremy in drunken fits. By the age of 13, Jeremy was struggling academically and had mental health issues due to a troubled home life. He became so overwhelmed that he tried to hang himself, but fortunately, someone intervened in time. He was later diagnosed with depression and hyperactivity. Due to the relentless bullying he faced at school, Jeremy decided to stop attending. As Jeremy navigated the dark period of his life, he developed a passion for the concept of live immortally and began exploring online forums, where like-minded people shared thoughts and ideas. His online profile was filled with morbid topics, including self-harm, pain, and violence. Unbeknownst to their families, Jeremy had started a dating relationship with Jasmine. Their friends were aware of the relationship, but they found it strange due to the large age gap. Everything remained a secret until Jasmine's parents, Deborah and Mark, discovered her excessive internet use and decided to monitor her online activity. What they found alarmed them. Jasmine was in contact with strangers, including Jeremy. He is someone with a suspicious online identity. His nickname, Soul Eater, and interests in dark themes raised concerns, leading Jasmine's parents to intervene and restrict her access to the computer. They were shocked to learn that Jasmine was in a dating relationship with Jeremy, making it clear to them that this relationship was not acceptable under any circumstances. Deborah and Mark took their daughter Jasmine to see a psychologist, hoping she would get the help she needed to escape her toxic relationship. The counseling sessions greatly improved their parent-child relationship, and Jasmine appeared to be returning to a normal life, claiming the past was behind her. She regained access to her computer. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a wrong decision and proved fatal for Jasmine's family. On the evening of Saturday, April 22, 2006, as the family prepared for bed, Deborah heard a noise in the basement and went to investigate. She initially thought the noise might be rats but discovered a person wearing a ski mask instead. The masked man stood opposite Deborah, and her first reaction was to scream. The stranger attempted to silence her by covering her mouth but was unsuccessful, prompting Deborah to scream even louder. The assailant then stabbed Deborah in the chest with a knife, twice. Mark, hearing his wife's desperate cries for help, rushed down to the basement. He was met with a horrific scene. His wife lay in a pool of blood, with the attacker standing nearby. Mark quickly responded by attacking the intruder. However, he was stabbed in the stomach and sustained additional stab wounds. As Mark's pain began to subside and he was losing consciousness, he quietly asked the attacker why he did that. The attacker coldly replied that it was because Mark's daughter had wanted it that way. Upstairs, Tyler was left alone and scared as the attacker approached. Tyler was still in his pajamas and was paralyzed with fear. The footsteps grew louder and the bedroom door opened. Just a few days before the murder, Jasmine was happy since her parents had forgiven her, allowing her to reconnect with them. Mobile phones weren't widely used at that time, so Jasmine used the computer to communicate with the outside world. As soon as she regained internet access, she immediately contacted Jeremy. She told Jeremy, "Everyone will think you and I are crazy, but there's one way we can be together, if my parents disappear." However, What Jasmine didn't reveal to her parents was that she was secretly forming a plan to kill them while she was receiving therapy sessions. She shared this plan with Jeremy. He found the idea appealing, but he stressed that everything needed to be carefully, meticulously planned and that attention to detail was required. Jasmine realized that as long as her parents were alive, she would never be able to be with Jeremy. During this time, Jasmine's friends noticed that she often complained about her parents, expressing her annoyance towards them. What they don't realize is that Jasmine's resentment eventually leads her to want to end her parents' lives. Despite her frequent comments about killing her parents, but her friends considered it just a funny joke. Garrett crossed the street to his friend Tyler's house on Saturday, April 22nd, in 2:06. He was excited to play, as the weather was pleasant. When he arrived at the Tyler's house, he noticed that the blinds were still closed, which seemed unusual. Even more unusual was that no one came to the door when he knocked. This surprised Garrett, as the Mark Best car was parked in the driveway. Curious and hoping to find someone, Garrett peeked through the living room window but didn't see anyone. He then walked to the back of the house, towards the basement area where he often played with Tyler. As he looked through the window, he saw something strange on the floor, what appeared to be two people lying in a pool of blood. This disturbing discovery prompted Garrett to inform his mother. Garrett's mother seemed suspicious at first but decided to check on Tyler's family. They approached the house together, and Garrett pointed to the window he had looked through earlier. The woman peeked inside and was met with a horrific sight, immediately prompting her to call emergency services. "There's been an incident at the Jasmine's house," she reported. The police swiftly arrived at the scene and forcibly entered the house through the front door. They then proceeded to the basement. Due to the severity of their injuries and the large amount of blood, the police initially struggled to identify the bodies. However, despite the difficulties, they were eventually able to confirm that the victims were Mark and Deborah, and tragically, they had lost their lives. The crime scene was exceptionally horrific, with blood splatters covering the floor, walls, and ceiling. Later, during a thorough search of the house, the police found a young child in the upstairs bedroom. The boy was lying in bed, surrounded by toys also splattered with blood, and had visible knife wounds. A young boy's throat had been severely cut. As police searched the house, they realized that the Mark and Deborah's eldest daughter, Jasmine, was missing. This raised concerns for her safety. Initial investigations suggested that the attack occurred in the basement and the child's room, with the rest of the house appearing untouched. The condition of the boy's body indicated that the crime likely took place the previous night. It seemed that the perpetrator had broken into the house and attacked the boy and his parents. But what had happened to Jasmine, and where was she? The police developed several theories to explain her disappearance. One possibility was that she had managed to escape and was somewhere safe. Another possibility was that the perpetrator had taken her and was harming her. However, as the investigation continued, no clear answers emerged. Detectives turned to the media for assistance in locating the missing girl. Jasmine, hoping she would reach out or someone would come forward with valuable information. The investigation into the crime continued. Investigators interviewed relatives and friends of Mark's family and their colleagues to gather more detailed information about their lives. They sought to determine if the family had any enemies who could be capable of such a heinous act. However, upon further investigation, they learned that Mark's family was well loved and had no enemies. They were a loving family with a strong marriage and positive relationships with their children, except for one exception, their eldest daughter, Jasmine, who had been causing trouble lately. As a result, the media announcements shifted focus. The investigation now sought to locate the eldest daughter, Jasmine, a very suspicious person. The girl may have information about the case or might have been involved in it. Under Canadian law, which prohibits publishing the names of minors, so news outlets started referring to Jasmine Richardson as JR because she was underage at the time. After news of her relationship with Jeremy spread, this couple has become a wanted person by the police. The police initially focused on their friends and acquaintances. However, this line of investigation was ultimately unsuccessful, and the investigation reached a dead end. Police investigation revealed some new information. A few hours after the crime, Jasmine and Jeremy were seen at a restaurant and a party hosted by a friend. A friend noticed that Jasmine was fine, showing no signs of distress or trauma, and she continued to socialize, drink, and have fun. When friends asked how they managed to escape from her parents, Jasmine laughed and replied in a light-hearted manner. Jeremy and she took care of them. However, Jeremy's tone took a darker turn when he nodded in agreement, and then he added that he had cut them up like fish, implying a violent act had occurred. Jasmine's laughter downplayed the severity of the situation, making it seem less significant. The party guests burst out laughing, thinking that the remark was a sick joke. However, they did not realize that it was actually true. The guests' amusement was also verified by a comedian who was present. The police found a detailed plan in Jasmine's school locker, revealing her intentions to harm her family members with the help of her boyfriend. The photos of the suspects were widely circulated, and it is likely that they will be caught soon, as someone is expected to come forward with information about their whereabouts. Eventually, police received a tip and found Jasmine and Jeremy in Leader, Saskatchewan, about 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. They were found sleeping in a pickup truck and were taken into custody without a struggle. Jasmine and her boyfriend, Jeremy, were questioned individually, with Jasmine being interviewed first. She told investigators that she and Jeremy were deeply in love and that he reciprocated her feelings. However, their relationship was impacted by two main issues: a large age gap and disparate social status. Jasmine claimed that her parents would never have approved of their relationship. According to Jasmine, Jeremy ended the lives of her parents so that they could be together. When detectives inquired about her involvement in the crime, Jasmine denied being present at the time it occurred and stated she had no prior knowledge of the event. After she found out what had happened, she decided to run away with him, because her love for Jeremy was so great. Detectives needed to identify the mastermind behind the plot. To get the suspect to cooperate, investigators came up with a clever tactic. They placed an undercover informant in Jeremy's cell, who successfully extracted information from him that contradicted Jasmine's claims. According to Jeremy, the plan to kill Jasmine's parents was actually she's idea. Jeremy was initially hesitant about going along with the plan. However, after realizing his own feelings for Jasmine, he agreed to it. Additionally, Jasmine's parents confiscating her computer as punishment also influenced his decision. Jeremy confessed to the informant. He took care of she parents, Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine took care of her younger brother, Tyler. Jeremy reveals that she desperately begged him to spare Tyler and come to her, and he was happy to get revenge on them all. Following Jeremy's confession, investigators questioned Jasmine using the recorded conversation between them and he as evidence, which left her no choice but to reveal every detail of the crime. She admitted that she stabbed her younger brother, Tyler, stating she didn't want to leave him behind as an orphan. In the following investigation, Jasmine and Jeremy voluntarily shared their social media profiles and passwords. By doing this, investigators were able to look at their private conversations and found thousands of messages that backed up Jeremy's previous claims. It became clear that Jasmine was indeed the mastermind behind the plan. Further investigation also uncovered a disturbing dynamic between Jasmine and Jeremy. Jeremy wrote that Jasmine was the only person who accepted and supported his unusual tastes, helping to alleviate the feelings of isolation he experienced due to not fitting in with societal norms. Fearing that he would lose her, he agreed to help carry out the horrific plan. One of Jeremy's messages contained a chilling passage, exposing his desire for violence. Jeremy wrote that he wanted revenge on Jasmine's parents and was determined to hold them accountable. His intention was to harm them and eventually make them disappear. Jeremy showed his affection for Jasmine in her time of need. However, his friends revealed a disturbing fact. Hours before the incident, Jeremy and his girlfriend had watched the 1994 film Natural Born Killers. This movie tells the story of a couple who brutally murder 9 people. Jeremy's friends stated that after watching the film, he expressed a desire to reenact a similar scenario with his girlfriend, calling it the best love story of all time. Based on the evidence collected, including witness testimony and the suspect's confessions, Jasmine but Jeremy, detectives were able to reconstruct incidents surrounding the crime. This led to the suspects being charged with 3 homicide counts. Jeremy was intoxicated before the incident. Jasmine allowed him into the house and led him to the basement, where he assaulted Deborah, Jasmine's mother. Deborah received 12 stab wounds, with the most severe wound penetrating 12 centimeters into her chest and damaging her heart, which ultimately caused her death. Jeremy then brutally attacked Mark, Jasmine's father, inflicting 24 wounds, 9 of which were on his back. Mark also bled to death on the basement floor. Meanwhile, upstairs Jasmine stabbed her younger brother Tyler 5 times. Then, Jeremy joined her. He coldly slit the boy's throat. Jeremy returned home to clean the blood off himself, while Jasmine took a taxi to a restaurant where they had agreed to meet. Once reunited, they discussed the incident of the night and then went to a party. Jeremy's friend, Casey Lancaster, helped them dispose of the evidence and evade authorities by fleeing to Saskatchewan. The brutality and gruesomeness of their actions are difficult to put into words. Jeremy and Jasmine committed their heinous crimes with ease and without emotion. What is even more disturbing is that during interrogation and detention, neither of them expressed any regret or remorse for their actions. While they were detained, Jeremy and Jasmine wrote letters to each other, referring to themselves as legendary and immortal. In one of these letters, Jeremy submitted a marriage proposal to Jasmine, and she happily accepted. Jasmine and Jeremy's intense relationship fell apart suddenly. As trial began, they blamed each other for their actions. Jasmine was the first to face trial in June 2007. She entered a not guilty plea, claiming that she was in a trance-like state at the time, which left her unable to intervene or stop Jeremy from killing her family. Jasmine also asserted that she only injured her younger brother, and Jeremy was the one who caused her younger brother's death. She made a statement that her conversations with Jeremy about killing her parents were just hypothetical discussions. But Jeremy took them seriously and pressured her into making them a reality. Jasmine received a 10 years prison sentence for 3 counts of homicide. However, due to Canadian laws regarding juvenile offenders, this was the maximum sentence she could receive as she was under 14 years old at the time of the crime. The primary goal of the sentence was to focus on healing and restoring the girl's mental well-being, rather than punishing her. In a 10-prison sentence, including 4 years in a psychiatric facility. During her stay, doctors diagnosed her with 2 conditions: conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. Jasmine showed genuine remorse for her actions in the years leading up to her release, which was noted by medical professionals during her community supervision. After serving her full sentence, Jasmine was released from prison in 2016 and has since been living in Canada under a new, protected identity. Her return to society has been met with mixed opinions, with some people supporting her right to a second chance, while others believe her punishment should have been more severe. The community in Medicine Hat has made it clear they do not want her to return. It remains to be seen whether Jasmine has truly changed and grown during her time in detention. Jeremy's trial began in 2008. He claimed that he had not initially intended to harm his girlfriend's parents, Deborah and Mark. However, after being discovered in the basement, he felt forced to attack. Jeremy denied harming Tyler and instead suggested that Jasmine was the one responsible. His defense argued that Jasmine had deliberately manipulated him into committing the crime, as she sought to escape her parents' strict control. Friends of Jeremy stated that he came to them before the crime. He confided in them his fear of losing Jasmine, to the point where he was willing to do anything to prevent it. Jeremy's lawyers asked the court to reduce the charges to manslaughter, suggesting that he was under the influence of substances at the time of the crime. When questioned by the prosecution about his motives, Jeremy gave an inconsistent response. He stated that when someone finds their soulmate, they will do whatever it takes to keep them. Throughout the trial, Jeremy remained largely unemotional, but broke down in tears when his mother, Jacqueline May, testified in his defense. Jacqueline felt guilty about the role she played in his upbringing, during which he was frequently physically and emotionally abused by her partners. In the end, Jeremy was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree homicide and received 3 life sentences. He will be eligible for parole in 25 years, starting in 2033. Casey Lancaster's charges related to being an accomplice in a crime have been dismissed in a Medicine Hat court. However, she was found guilty of obstructing justice. As a result, she received a 1-year sentence of house arrest and was prohibited from using drugs and alcohol during her custody. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nancy Lagerquist. Nancy Lagerquist, an 87-year-old woman, was a resident at the Riverside Healthcare Center, where she had lived since 1988. She was born in 1902 in Hamilton, Montana, and she spent much of her life working as an executive secretary. She was also an active member of the Missoula Business and Professional Women's Club before her retirement. She remained single for her entire life and did not have any children. When she passed away, she also did not have many relatives. On July 1, 1990, Nancy was seen sleeping in her bed by a care worker at 3:30 a.m. 1 hour later, at 4:30 a.m., the care worker checked on her room again but found her missing. This caused alarm and prompted 5 staff members on the shift to conduct a search. Despite their efforts, Nancy was nowhere to be found. At 4:41 a.m., the police were notified about her disappearance. It is worth noting that Nancy required around-the-clock assistance as she was unable to walk. Before her disappearance, she had been living an ordinary life at the care home, with nothing in her background suggesting she was at risk. Law enforcement and search and rescue teams arrived quickly at the scene. They searched the home and the surrounding area thoroughly. Since the home was located along the Clark Fork River, police officers in boats also searched the water. At 6:30 a.m., they stopped searching. Authorities found Nancy's body near the riverbank, about 30 minutes downstream from Riverside. She was the victim of a brutal murder involving sexual assault. Afterward, her body was thrown into the water. 2 investigators working on the case quickly realized the enormity of the challenge ahead. The discovery of Nancy's body in the water resulted in the destruction of any forensic evidence. Additionally, several key pieces of evidence, including Nancy's missing diaper and the possible murder weapon, were never found, leaving the police with unanswered questions. Detectives theorized that the perpetrator entered and exited Nancy's room through the window facing the river. To do this, they cut the window screen, but left no evidence on the window, windowsill, or anywhere else in the room. It is also puzzling that none of the home's alarm systems were triggered during the entry, and further checks revealed that all alarms were working properly at the time. A key witness reported seeing a man near the crime scene around 4 a.m. He walked through the parking lot of the Missoula Athletic Club, moving away from the river toward East Broadway Street. This individual was approximately 30 to 40 years old, 180 to 200 pounds, and had distinct physical features, including light brown collar-length hair, a mustache, and brown-rimmed glasses. He wore an untucked, striped white and brown t-shirt, which was longer at the back, along with tan shorts and white tennis shoes. The man was not considered a suspect in the case, but the police did want to question him. Nancy had very few relatives, so investigators quickly dismissed a family-related motive for the murder. They shifted their focus to the care home staff. Considering that a staff member would be familiar with the layout and security measures of the facility, leading them to suspect that the murder could be an inside job. This led authorities to concentrate on a particular male staff member. He was eventually cleared, but he left the care home less than a month later for unclear reasons. The police investigation shifted from focusing on a staff member to the possibility of an outside perpetrator. They observed that the home's security measures concentrated on the doors rather than the windows, leading them to speculate that the victim, Nancy, might have been targeted simply because her room faced the river, with no specific motive for the attack. During the investigation, a man named James Bailey was interviewed multiple times, but was eventually cleared as a suspect. Detectives have been reviewing witness statements to look for any other suspicious deaths at the nursing home. Their attention was drawn to the case of 86-year-old Bertha Scott, an Alzheimer's patient who passed away in her bed on May 2, 1990. At the time, her death was attributed to natural causes, as she had heart disease and was frequently restrained at night to prevent her from wandering. However, one nurse reported an unusual detail, a bruise on Bertha's neck, which they found suspicious. Bertha died and was buried without an autopsy being performed. Around the time of her death, staff members at her care home noticed some minor tampering with the windows in the physical therapy room. Based on a nurse's comments, the police decided to exhume Bertha's body to re-examine her cause of death. The police later revealed to her family that she had been raped, then she being strangled to death, leaving them in shock. Bertha's life is very different from Nancy's. Born in Pennsylvania in 1904, and Bertha married 20 years later. 2 years before her death, she moved to Missoula to be closer to her children. Although 4 of her 6 children had passed away before her, she left behind numerous grandchildren. During the medical examination of Bertha's body, semen was found, and the sample was collected. Unfortunately, the sample was too degraded to produce a DNA profile, therefore was unable to help the police identify her killer. Both cases eventually came to a dead end. In 1992, authorities investigated a suspect who was guilty of sexually assaulting a nursing home resident, but he had an alibi since he was in prison during the murders. The same year, Lloyd Chase Allen was also identified as a suspect, but he too was incarcerated at the time. In 2002, the Missoulian reported that several residents of the care home described a mysterious man who would walk the halls at night. There are concerns about the accuracy of the information provided by these residents, so it's difficult to determine whether this man actually existed. As a result, it is that additional unsolved cases exist. Without DNA evidence or further investigation, a resolution to this case seems unlikely. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Quesera Stops Pretty Places. Quesera Stops Pretty Places was born on August 14, 2001. She grew up in a large family and was a member of the Crow and North Cheyenne Native American reservations in Montana. As a teenager, she was an exceptional athlete, enjoying various sports including basketball, football, running, cross-country, and wrestling. She also had a passion for the arts, performing in plays and singing in her high school choir at Hardin High School. Quesera is a kind and compassionate person, always caring and understanding to those she comes into contact with. In her free time, she often cared for stray animals. Her lifelong dream was to become a performer, aspiring to act and sing, with a bright future ahead of her. However, her life was tragically cut short shortly after she turned 18. Quesera was last seen in the rural town of Hardin, near the Crow Reservation, on August 24, 2019. She lives with her grandmother, who is named Yolanda Frazier. People did not know where she went, but it was clear that she did not return home. Quesera planned to meet her mother the following day for a trip to North Dakota but failed to appear. Her family began to worry when Quesera, no responding to texts, didn't answer calls, and was inactive on social media. This was unusual for her, raising concerns that something was amiss. Quesera's aunt, Priscilla Bulltail, went to the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office to report Quesera's niece missing. However, the office told her that she would have to wait a while before filing a report. This information proved to be false. In Montana, because Quesera was under 21 and considered a minor, police were required to conduct an immediate search. Despite this, it wasn't until August 27 that the missing persons report was finally allowed to be filed by Quesera's family. Quesera's family felt that the police did not take her disappearance seriously, they failing to conduct a search and failing to distribute flyers after she went missing. When she went missing, police initially told Priscilla that Quesera was probably just out with friends. Quesera had previously struggled with alcohol issues, most notably when she was found unresponsive at school in 2019 due to intoxication and required emergency medical help. After her disappearance, her family waited anxiously for any information about her whereabouts. It wasn't until 5 days later, on August 29, that a jogger stumbled upon Quesera's body near a wood pile in a backyard at the intersection of Mitchell Avenue and Rangeview Drive in the Hardin suburb, the same area where she was last seen alive. Notably, the homeowner, who had no connection to Quesera, was away at the time of the discovery. Quesera's family was not immediately notified that a body had been found, and instead, they learned about the information through social media rumors. As the news spread, they became extremely concerned. Priscilla attempted to visit the scene to identify the body, but was denied access and she couldn't tell if it was Quesera or not. Local news outlets were also not alerted to the discovery of the body. Quesera's mother and Yolanda visited the local mortuary on September 1 to identify a body, but they were initially told it was not Quesera's. As a result, the family continued their search for her. It wasn't until 10 days later that the body was confirmed to be Quesera's. The coroner concluded that she died on August 26 and that her death was suspicious, requiring further investigation. However, due to the advanced decomposition of her remains, the exact cause of her death could not be determined. It was also not possible to rule out asphyxiation as a cause of death. Following Quesera's body discovery, her family urged law enforcement to investigate her death. However, the family soon encountered resistance from Terry Bullis, the county coroner and owned the local funeral home Bullis Mortuary. Terry informed Quesera's mother, Geraldine, on September 12 that her daughter's remains would have to be cremated in order for them to be returned to the family. This went against the family's cultural beliefs and also meant that no further examinations of the body would be possible. Moreover, the family had chosen the Dahl Funeral Home to handle the funeral arrangements, but Terry forced them to use his business, Bullis Mortuary Funeral Home. To the family's dismay, Quesera was cremated before her other relatives could even arrive in Hardin. On September 14, the family located the site where Quesera's body was discovered with the help of nearby relatives. A few days earlier, they had tried to visit the area, but were unable to, as the scene was no longer cordoned off and there were no boundaries to where the body was discovered. They met Jason Cummings, the neighbor who had found Quesera's body. He told them that he had suggested to the police to charge her phone so they could contact the family. Unfortunately, it seemed the police had ignored his suggestion. Jason also questioned the authorities for not sealing off the crime scene, causing evidence to be destroyed. 5 days after Quesera went missing, On September 19th, her family contacted the media to raise awareness about the case. However, they were surprised to discover that local news outlets, including the Billings Gazette, were unaware of the situation. The Gazette said it called the sheriff's office daily for updates on the cases, but they were not notified about Quesera's case. On the same day, Quesera's mother, Geraldine, along with Quesera's father, Alan, met with Captain Mike Fuss from the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office. They questioned Captain Fuss about why he had not contacted them or returned their calls. Captain Mike explained that he had been preoccupied with other cases. When asked why the crime scene had not been sealed off, Captain Mike stated that according to protocol, if investigators arrived at the scene before uniformed officers, sealing off the scene was not necessary. However, if officers arrived first, the scene would be sealed off. Geraldine and Alan also inquired about Quesera's phone, asking why law enforcement had not charged it to examine her recent communications. Captain Mike seemed surprised that the family knew about this detail and explained that the battery was dead, so they did not attempt to use it. However, Quesera's family countered that the authorities could have charged the phone to access for recent activity. They initially claimed that not even the FBI could gain access to the phone's contents. Captain Mike reported that Quesera had apparently died from alcohol poisoning. However, her family's offer of a $5,000 reward for any information about her death. Mike's response was unexpected and surprising, revealing a clear expression of anger. Additionally, Mike revealed that the original investigator, Jeremy Middlestead, had resigned from the case, citing that he couldn't handle it. A number of new developments occurred during this time. Quesera's family was interviewed by law enforcement for the first time, and they also met with the Bighorn County Attorney, Jay Harris. Jay disclosed that the coroner, Terry Bullis, had a potential conflict of interest due to his roles as the owner of a funeral home business and the county medical examiner. Jay noted that under Terry's leadership, many deaths had been rapidly attributed to exposure to alcohol and natural causes. However, when the family sought answers to their questions, Jay was short-tempered and provided little clarity. On the 23rd, Quesera's family received notice that her missing person report had not been filed and that her name was not in the missing persons database. A week later, the FBI declined to take the case, stating they required more evidence that Quesera was murdered on the reservation. Notably, shortly before Quesera's disappearance, she recorded a video of her 15-year-old wheelchair-bound younger brother being beaten by several police officers and shared it on social media. The incident involved deputies from the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office, resulting in disciplinary actions against the officers involved. However, one of the policemen present at the scene where Quesera's body was found was said to be a policeman involved in the beating. This has raised suspicions that the police involved in Quesera's death chose not to investigate, possibly to retaliate against her for her attempts to hold them responsible for her actions. 2 years after Quesera's death, new information surfaced in August 2021. 4 witnesses came forward with accounts of the incident that led to her death. Their statements are not entirely consistent, but they generally agree on what happened. The witnesses reported that an argument took place outside a house on Rangeview Drive around 3 a.m. on August 26, 2019. Quesera was involved in the argument with 3 other individuals, a 17-year-old girl, a 19-year-old woman, and a 23-year-old man. It was claimed that Quesera had been at the house earlier, and one of the occupants had bought her alcohol. At the time of her death, her blood alcohol level was 0.149. The argument prompted a nearby resident to set off their car alarm, hoping the noise would cause the group to leave. And the group dispersed in different directions. Quesera was last seen heading towards the area where her body was later found. Additional information was also revealed in the new report. Forensic analysis found no foreign DNA under Quesera's fingernails. Furthermore, it was discovered that Quesera had been diagnosed with asthma shortly before her disappearance. The case remains unsolved, and the authorities are still seeking information. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jemia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jemia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in a fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jemia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her fourth daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tayan's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee, or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Hiringa. Jessica Hiringa was born on July 16, 1987, in Norton Shores, Michigan, to a humble family, and that included a sister. At 22, she had a son named Zahn with her long-term partner Dakota Quayle Dyer, and by 25, the couple was still together and raising Zahn in a rented home. Jessica worked as a manager at a local Exxon gas station near Lake Michigan, where she was well-liked by customers for her friendly nature. She often worked extra hours to provide for Zahn, and her ambition was evident in her diary entries, which expressed her desire to pursue a college degree in accounting. However, financial constraints prevented her from achieving this goal. Dakota, her partner and the father of her child, was unable to fully support their family, leading to disagreements, and their relationship was strained. Despite being engaged, their wedding plans were repeatedly delayed due to various circumstances. On April 26, 2013, she started the day by shopping at a nearby store around 3 p.m. and then drove to work. Arriving at 4:35 p.m., Jessica began her night shift at the Exxon gas station. As she began her shift, she was the only employee on duty that night. At 11:14 p.m., a customer called 911 to report a strange situation at the Exxon station. He had entered the store to pay for his gas but found no one to take his payment. The store was unattended, with the door open and lights on. The customer informed the dispatcher 911, "The store is empty, but there are 2 cars parked outside, mine and another one. It looks unusual." Police officers arrived at the Exxon gas station about 10 minutes after the call. They inspected the petrol station and found no signs of a struggle or disturbance. Everything was in order. Inside the store, police discovered Jessica's coat and purse, containing $400, and her car and house keys in the back room. A single drop of Jessica's blood was found near the back door. Police also found a cap from a Walther P.22 semi-automatic pistol's laser sight and 2 watch batteries on the floor. The cash register was intact, with all the money still in it. The last transaction was recorded at 10:52 p.m. for a lighter. Unfortunately, the gas station did not have interior surveillance cameras. Jessica's pack of cigarettes was left on the counter next to the cash register, suggesting she had temporarily stepped away. Her car was locked and parked outside, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. She had mysteriously vanished. The police discovered that the gas station was unattended, so they contacted the owner and informed her. The owner then asked a nearby manager to come to the gas station for protection. The police also notified Jessica's family that she was missing. Her parents began searching for clues and called her friends to see if they had any information. One friend reported being at the gas station around 8 to 9 p.m. that day and said everything seemed normal. However, a fellow employee who arrived to close the station shortly after recalled a suspicious incident. Around 11 p.m., the employee and her boyfriend drove by the station on a motorcycle and saw a silver Chrysler Town Country minivan parked near the back door with its door open. They initially thought Jessica might be involved in a theft, so they kept watching. The employee saw a young man with disheveled wavy hair and an orange sweatshirt near the minivan. He repeatedly opened and closed the rear door before driving away. Further investigation revealed a surveillance video from a nearby building showing a silver Chrysler passing the Exxon gas station at 11:02 p.m. The police also spoke to Christian, who reported seeing the man in the minivan talking to Jessica earlier. Christian initially believed the man was just flirting with Jessica because of her attractiveness. A composite sketch of the suspect in Jessica's disappearance was created with the help of Christian, who had seen the man near a minivan. The suspect was described as a young male with light skin, dark wavy hair, a stocky build, and approximately 6 feet tall. 3 days after Jessica went missing, the sketch was released. In spite of, police received many calls, but no information was available that helped the case. A main issue in the investigation was the large number of silver Chrysler minivans in the United States. Specifically, in Michigan, there were 15,000 registered vehicles of the same kind. This made it difficult to identify the driver of the minivan related to Jessica's disappearance. Jessica Hiringa's boyfriend, Dakota, was initially suspected in her disappearance due to their frequent arguments. However, Dakota denied this and cooperated with the investigation, stating he was at home with their son on the night of her disappearance. Since Dakota didn't have a car, he couldn't have gone to her workplace, and his phone records confirmed his alibi. After verifying his story, the police excluded him from the list of suspects. Further investigation revealed that Jessica's friendly and outgoing personality helped her attract many admirers. Jess Ammerman, a 37-year-old married plumber, was one such admirer. On the evening of her disappearance, around 9:30 p.m., Jess visited Jessica at the gas station, confessed his feelings, and claimed he was willing to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rejected his advances. He then left the station, called his wife, and spoke with her for about 50 minutes before returning home. After undergoing a polygraph test and being interrogated and interviewed along with his wife, the police also cleared Jess Ammerman as a suspect. Rob Fallett, the brother of the manager at the Exxon gas station, where Jessica worked, was initially considered a suspect in her disappearance. Around 9 p.m. on the day she vanished, Rob visited the station and reported that Jessica appeared upset. When he asked her what was wrong, she shared that she was having family problems. Rob offered to let her stay with him, but she declined the offer. Fallett then left to go night fishing in a nearby lake. After investigating Rob's alibi, detectives discovered his phone records supported his claim and he was cleared of the crime. Search and rescue operations for Jessica were launched with helicopters, specially trained dogs, and thorough searches of homes, businesses, wells, wooded areas, and Lake Michigan. However, no leads were found, causing the case to reach a standstill. About a year later, in February 2014, a similar incident occurred in Michigan. A young woman with a similar appearance to Jessica was kidnapped and attacked by a man while walking home late at night. She was taken to his apartment, where she was attacked, and her life was threatened. The woman was eventually released after several hours. The suspect, 42-year-old Brad Allen Mason. Mason was eventually found by police, but he resisted arrest, threatening officers with a fake gun. Then, he was fatally shot during the confrontation. Brad had a history of crime, including being convicted of kidnapping in 2004 and arrested for indecent exposure in 2011. In 2014, he lived in a dorm near the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. Despite this, investigators couldn't find any evidence linking Mason to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years after Jessica disappeared, a similar incident happened in 2016. A young woman was walking home from a friend's party late at night when she got lost on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan stopped and asked if she was okay, offering to give her a ride. She refused the ride but asked to use his phone. The man agreed, but only if she got into the minivan. Once she was inside, he locked the door, said his phone was dead, and he pulled out his gun, asked her to keep quiet. Then he started driving. The woman was feeling extremely unwell and nauseated, so she asked the driver to roll down the window for her. She quickly took advantage of the opportunity and jumped out of the moving vehicle through the window, running to a nearby house for safety. The driver quickly sped away and escaped. The victim immediately called the police and provided a detailed description of her kidnapper. By examining footage from nearby surveillance cameras, the police were able to identify the license plate number of the vehicle, a silver Chrysler Town & Country. The investigation eventually identified the driver as Jeffrey Willis, 46 years old. Jeffrey Willis, a factory worker, lived a reclusive and humble life, with no criminal record. When police found and searched his minivan, they discovered a semi-automatic Walther .22 pistol. It was discovered that this pistol had been reported stolen by a coworker of Jeffrey some time ago. Jeffrey was arrested and taken into custody. Upon searching his residence, police found a collection of various BDSM items, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet matching the Walther .22 pistol. They also discovered medical supplies and sedatives, which included insulin syringes with unknown substances and disposable gloves. Investigators found a diagram of the woman's body, with some parts marked. Upon examining his computer, several distressing videos were found, showing scenes of young women being kidnapped. A hidden hard drive discovered in a ventilation duct contained secretly recorded footage of Jeffrey's female neighbors swimming. Furthermore, on his computer, police discovered a folder labeled Victims that included 2 subfolders. The first subfolder was named after missing woman Jessica, and the second subfolder contained information about a murdered woman named Rebecca. Rebecca Blech, a 36-year-old woman who suffered a tragic fate. Approximately 1 year after Jessica went missing, Rebecca was murdered on June 29, 2014. Rebecca had gone out for a run in the evening but never returned home. She was discovered by her neighbors lying on the road, with her clothing disheveled. Initially, it was believed that she had been hit by a car. Although Rebecca was unconscious, she still had a pulse when found. Emergency services were immediately called, but unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries before she could be saved. Autopsy reports later revealed that Rebecca died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, along with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of Rebecca's death, the suspect has not yet been identified. However, 2 years after Jeffrey's arrest, investigators uncovered new evidence linking Rebecca's murder to the handgun found in his small truck. Prosecutors alleged that Jeffrey had attempted to abduct Rebecca and bring her back to his home, but when Rebecca resisted, he shot her and fled the scene. Despite his denial, forensic analysis discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove found in Jeffrey's residence. As a result, he was convicted of Rebecca's murder and received a life sentence. While serving his sentence, Jeffrey faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica, despite he consistently denying any involvement in her disappearance. Nonetheless, a review of his phone records revealed that he was present at the Exxon gas station where Jessica was last seen on the night she vanished. He then went to his grandfather's house, about 13 minutes from the station. When police arrived at that house, they discovered something surprising. Although the front door was secured with heavy locking, the police were able to break in easily. What they discovered was disturbing. In the basement, they found a large stash of cleaning supplies, including various powders and bleaches, that had all been manufactured in early 2013, around the same time Jessica disappeared. It was found that Jeffrey had been absent from his job on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica's disappearance. Colleagues reported that his absence was unusual. When he returned to work a few days later, he had noticeable deep scratches on his face and hands. This has made people who know him suspicious. A woman who visited the gas station on April 25, the evening before Jessica vanished, contacted the police. She had arrived at the station late that evening and expressed her concern to Jessica about being alone at such a late hour. Jessica acknowledged her concern with a nod. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station overheard the conversation and reassured the visitor, saying, "Don't worry, Jessica has customers who look after her." The man then left the gas station. Despite the stranger's reassurance, the visitor remained concerned about Jessica's safety and waited in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and headed home. Unfortunately, Jessica disappeared the following day. In 2016, the witness positively identified Jeffrey as the unknown man, recalling his presence at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Jeffrey had frequently visited the Exxon gas station, interacting with Jessica at least 15 times prior to her disappearance. Kevin Bloom, a 48-year-old prison guard and Jeffrey's cousin, was arrested. During questioning, Kevin's statements were inconsistent, ultimately leading him to confess. He revealed details about Rebecca's death that were not publicly known at the time, and also admitted to helping Jeffrey hide Jessica's body. Kevin described how, on April 27, the day after Jessica's abduction, Jeffrey invited him to a party at his house. When Kevin arrived, he found Jessica lying lifeless and bound on the floor. Kevin and Jeffrey wrapped Jessica's body in a sheet and drove to a forest, where Jeffrey had already dug a grave. They buried Jessica and then returned home. When the police asked Kevin to take them to the burial site, he had difficulty remembering the exact location. Despite searching the forest for a while, he was unable to pinpoint the spot where they had buried Jessica's body. The trial of Jeffrey began, even though Jessica's body had not been found. The prosecution presented strong evidence to charge Jeffrey with kidnapping and murder. They alleged that he had been stalking Jessica for a long time. On April 26, 2013, Jeffrey allegedly parked near the gas station's entrance, went inside, and hit Jessica on the head with his gun. During the assault, the gun's laser sight cover fell off, and Jessica's blood was flowing to the floor. Jeffrey then allegedly dragged she out through the exit, put her in the back seat of his car, and drove her to his late grandfather's house. Forensic analysis of Jeffrey's devices revealed that he saved photos and news articles about the search for Jessica on his computer. As investigators followed the case, they found that he used a password that included her initials and the date April 27, 2013. This suggests that April 27, 2013, was likely the day she died, one day after her disappearance. Jeffrey maintained his innocence, claiming he was at home on the night Jessica was kidnapped. His lawyers pointed out that there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime, and no DNA evidence belonging to Jessica was found in his home or vehicle. Jeffrey's defense team argued that Jessica had been struggling with serious substance abuse problems in the time before her disappearance, suggesting that her kidnapping might be connected to her involvement in the illicit drug trade. Despite his claims of innocence, Jeffrey was found guilty of murdering Jessica and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions. Willis's cousin, Kevin Bloom, was also found guilty of helping to dispose of Jessica's body and received a sentence of 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Years after Jeffrey's conviction, new information came to light that implicated him in an older, unsolved case. On October 17, 1996, the body of Angela Thorberg was found in Fruitport, Michigan, with her killer never identified. After further investigation, Ed Bloom, a 1988 high school graduate and Kevin Bloom's father, was linked to the murder of Angela Thorberg in 1996. However, later evidence suggested that it was Jeffrey who became a suspect in Angela Thorberg's death. It has been 10 years since Jessica went missing, but her body has still not been found. After her disappearance, a court battle took place over the custody of Jessica and Dakota's son, Zon. Jessica's husband, Dakota, sought custody, but ultimately lost the case to Jessica's family. Zon currently lives with his grandparents and relatives on his father's side. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sonda Diameter. In December 2018, a group of college students brought their 20-year-old friend Sonda to the emergency room in critical condition. He was unresponsive, extremely pale, and had a body temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. This was unusual because Sonda was a healthy and active young man with no previous health problems. The medical team ran several tests, which revealed that Sonda had hypernatremia, a life-threatening condition caused by too much sodium in the body. Normally, an adult consumes about 2 grams of sodium per day, but Sonda's body contains 160 grams, equivalent to about 2 months' worth of sodium. The medical team asked Sonda's friends what had happened, but they simply shrugged, avoided eye contact and pretended not to know about Sonda's condition. It was clear that something was wrong. Despite the efforts of medical professionals to save him, Sonda, 20, died of multiple organ failure. The autopsy revealed the initial findings. The pathologist examined Sonda's stomach to understand the cause of the seemingly healthy college student's sudden death. To the doctor's surprise and shock, he discovered that he had not eaten or drank any food or water for the past 2 days. Instead, his stomach contained foreign objects such as goldfish from an aquarium, the head of a rat, and the entire head of an eel. This indicated that Sonda had suffered horrific experiences before his death. The case attracted a lot of media attention, quickly becoming an international topic of discussion. Talks broke out about universities covering up shocking student misconduct and the lack of responsibility of the children of wealthy families. A student association called Reusgum was closely monitored. Reusgum, founded more than 70 years ago, is symbolized by a Flemish lion. The secret society has about 30 active male members, mostly law, engineering, and business students from prestigious families. Reusgum is one of the most prestigious and sought-after groups at the prestigious Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, with only 2 or 3 new members admitted each year. The secret society is surrounded by rumors, which makes it all the more mysterious and mysterious. It is like an elite group of students with a lot of power and influence on campus. The Reusgum Student Secret Society has begun planning its annual initiation ceremony for new members. The ceremony includes a unique and daring menu, starting with appetizers such as roasted grasshoppers and cockroaches, followed by a main course of rats and raw fish. Dessert is a mix of coffee and a banned substance. A disturbing photo of a Reusgum fraternity's initiation ceremony has gone viral. The photo shows the group's leaders dressed in worn clothes, while 4 new members are kneeling. 2 of the new members are pictured with a gun pointed at their heads, a pistol, and a rifle. The photo raises many questions. What other types of rituals does this secretive group conduct? What exactly are the events that take place inside the fraternity? Considering the backgrounds of many of its members, parents, politicians, lawyers, prominent doctors, and business leaders, what would they do to protect their children if something truly happened seriously? Sonda never had any aspirations of joining the Reusgum fraternity. Instead, he was a young man born in Belgium to a Senegalese father who sought asylum in the country a few years before he was born. As an immigrant, Sonda's father worked hard to ensure his 2 sons could live a good life. He knew that because of the color of his skin, his children would have to work twice as hard to gain the same respect and career opportunities as native Belgians. Sonda's father, Dia, worked long hours at a factory, spent many nights mastering the local language, and slept or stayed up all night to help his son study. His only desire was for his sons to succeed in life. From a young age, Sonda understood the importance of working towards his goals. He realized that success will not come easily and required perseverance and hard work. As he grew up, Sonda had a close friend named Ferry, who lived nearby. The 2 shared interests such as cycling, comics, and dreams of going to college, finding a good job, saving money, and eventually moving to Japan. They even promised to be lifelong friends and visit Japan together one day. However, fate had other plans for Sonda, and he will never have the chance to visit his dreamland. As a teenager, Sonda had many friends. He had an innate ability to excel in various activities, such as solving complex math problems and playing soccer, which surprised his friends. Despite his special talents, Sonda was loved by everyone for his easygoing and charming personality. He was sociable and easy to get along with, which made it easy for him to make friends. After completing high school, Sonda made his family proud by becoming the first person to attend a prestigious university, the University of Leuven. His father was extremely happy with this achievement, which exceeded his dreams. Although the university was close to home, Sonda chose to live in a dormitory. He pursued civil engineering and was determined to get a master's degree in the field. Sonda's maturity and ambition drove him to make his father proud. His ultimate goal was to graduate, secure a high-paying job, and allow his father to retire, repaying the sacrifices he had made for his children's future. By 2018, Sonda was in his third year of a 5-year program and was already thinking about his career after graduation. In order to achieve his goal of securing a high-paying job to support his family and pay the bills, he stayed away from parties and focused on finding a job. Realizing that his skin color could be a hindrance in a predominantly European industry, and with his high academic achievements, communication skills, and hard work, he realized that building relationships was important. This realization leads him to consider joining the Reusgum, a group that has important connections and is essential to his career. Joining the Reusgum seems to be a strategic decision. Many of its members come from prominent families, which makes Sonda's decision to apply a surprise to his friends, except for his brother, who understands the potential career advantages of the organization. However, his childhood friend Ferry has reservations about these groups and even tries to dissuade Sonda from joining, seeing it as a potentially dangerous move. If Ferry had known the tragic outcome that would befall Sonda, he would never have stopped trying to stop him. Sonda's decision to join Reusgum was not an impulsive one, he considered it carefully. With 2 years left until the end of his studies in 2018, he weighed the pros and cons before making his final decision. Sonda was then one of 10 students who successfully passed Reusgum's rigorous selection process. Of these 10, only 3, including Sonda, advanced to the final selection stage. In the first stage, Reusgum members screen out candidates who do not match their interests, personalities, or communication styles. Once the final 3 are narrowed down, the real challenge begins. We'll spend 2 months rigorously evaluating the 3 selected, culminating in a 2 to 3 day selection ceremony. During this intense evaluation process, the recruits are subjected to constant, relentless humiliation and complete dependence on the members of the Reusgum Society. Sonda learns about the brutal initiation rituals of the society, but he is willing to go through with it for the promise of a better future. Like the other 2 candidates, Sonda understands that the process will be difficult and push them to their limits. However, no one anticipates risking their lives in such situations. Sonda's school friend, who belongs to another society, has his own views on the Reusgum initiation activities. He sees it as a challenging test of endurance, brotherhood, and self-control. Although he admits that it is difficult, he believes that it is a necessary experience and will ultimately be rewarding. However, Sonda has a very horrifying experience. He is forced to drink too much alcohol. What was even more disturbing was that he was forced to drink the urine of existing members of the society. Sonda and the other newcomers were constantly insulted. Sonda had the worst of it. He was ridiculed for the color of his skin, which made his experience even more unpleasant. In October 2018, the society held a large event at the Student Union building. New members, including Sonda, were forced to kneel and take turns drinking large amounts of strong alcohol. Despite this, the newcomers were still forced to clean up the place. They stumbled across the floor, trying to clean up their own and others' vomit. The experience was traumatic and humiliating for Sonda and the other new members. That night, The 3 new members were ordered to clean up, but the Ryuzgam brothers had other plans. They decide that only the dark-skinned man, Sonda, will be cleaned, citing historical precedent where dark-skinned men served white men. Sonda feels powerless to protest, but he is determined to overcome it. Knowing that this situation will eventually end, Sonda worked hard to be accepted into the society, but at the age of 20, he was still quite naive. Despite the pain he had gone through, Sonda continued to attend the society's meetings. Sonda loved his father, who had sacrificed a lot for his education, and Sonda was determined to make him proud. Sonda hoped that the humiliation would end once he passed the final hurdle. The Ryuzgam Society, which has a history of over 70 years, had only 2 members of African descent. In 2015, a dark-skinned student was inducted, and Sonda was about to become the second person to undergo the final initiation ceremony, also known as baptism. On December 4, 2018, the initiation process for new members began at 4 p.m. In the first challenge, 3 candidates, including Sonda, wear long, flowing white robes and walk into town with bouquets of flowers. Their goal is to sell as many flowers as possible by the end of the challenge. The person who sells the fewest flowers is punished. These punishments include drinking yogurt and other unpleasant substances. Sonda ends up in last place, selling 30 fewer roses than his competitors. This leads to his punishment, where he is forced to drink a significant amount of alcohol, affecting his ability to speak. The initiation moves into the second phase. The new members, now kneeling, are asked simple questions. However, by 7 p.m., the members of the association have become less tolerant of Sonda's inability to answer these questions clearly. Unsurprisingly, he is defeated by the other competitors and faces further punishments. His punishment was to drink 1.5 bottles of gin. His body, not used to the large amount of alcohol, began to react painfully. His stomach was filled with the alcohol he had drunk. Sonda's health quickly deteriorated, leaving him unable to walk, talk, or move, as he faced severe dehydration and passed out repeatedly. Surprisingly, this incident took place in a public place, right on the sidewalk in front of a cafe in the city square. However, no passers-by intervened or called the police for help. At 9 p.m., the third challenge, called Endure the Night, began. The student council took the new recruits to their dormitory, where the 18 student council brothers continued to torture them relentlessly. This time, the participants were required to drink as much beer as possible. By the end of the ordeal, all 3 participants were unconscious, although they were still breathing. However, this did not stop the continued abuse. According to the order's custom, when someone faints, they are urinated on by the order's members. A video was recorded of these actions at 11:40 p.m., but the perpetrators attempted to delete the footage. When the first day of the event ended, the new members were taken to their quarters and violently thrown onto their beds. The water supply was cut off as a prank. The initiates' belongings were vandalized with ketchup and chocolate, and they were locked up. This meant that if any of them woke up, they would not have access to water to relieve their dehydration, having consumed a potentially fatal amount of alcohol. This was just the beginning of a week-long initiation ceremony at one of the country's most esteemed universities. But the most traumatic experiences were yet to come. The next day, December 5, 2018, at around 10:30 a.m., the members of the order were ready to begin the final stage of the initiation ceremony. They woke up the 3 new members, loaded them into a car, and drove out of the city to a remote village about an hour away. One of the members of the order had a small, isolated house surrounded by dense forests, ideal for keeping their activities secret. Along the way, they stopped several times to purchase the necessary items for the ceremony. They visited a pet store to buy items such as aquarium fish, eels, live rodents, as well as bird and dog food from a pet store. They then stopped at a supermarket to buy various products, including fish sauce. However, this sauce is high in sodium and is not usually consumed in large quantities. They also bought duck eggs, sardines, clams, shrimp paste, mussels, and other seafood products. During their stop, a professor approached the group of students and noticed that one of the students was in need of help. She expressed her concerns to the society members and even suggested calling the police. However, the society members, quickly convincing her that the student was simply drunk and in shock, stated that the initiation ceremony was over and that they would help him recover by giving him a cold shower. This seemed to allay the professor's concerns. The group then went to a cabin in the woods. The police have reconstructed the details of what happened next through the recovered deleted footage and some evidence. The truth about the events that took place in that forest is still unclear. For several hours, the three beginners had to dig a large hole, which they were then placed in. Other members of the student union surrounded the hole. They filled it with cold water and live eels. In Belgium, the average temperature in December is around +3 to +7 degrees Celsius. When the newcomers start shivering from the cold, the members of the society urinate on them from above, a strange act that is said to warm them. At this point, Sonda was dehydrated and still drunk from the night before. Even if he wanted to get up and leave, he couldn't. Normally, if a new initiate wanted to stop, he would just ring a bell placed at the edge of the pit, but this time the bell had been removed, leaving Sonda with no way to indicate that he wanted to stop. His physical condition, unable to stand or speak, left him helpless. The three new members, exhausted and drunk, were forced to sit in ice water and endure the urination and defecation of the members of the order. They were then forced to bite the heads of rats and eels that lived in the water and drink fish oil. After 6 hours of enduring these brutal conditions, Sonda's body began to weaken and he passed out. Finally, he was taken out of the water, dressed in dry clothes, and placed next to the fire. As he curled up on the ground for 2 hours, the initiation ritual continued around him. As Sonda's health deteriorated, instead of seeking immediate medical help, the fraternity members spent their time taking pictures and recording Sonda's painful images and sounds. Sonda's body was now reacting violently to the excessive sodium intake, leading to high blood pressure and a nosebleed. Sonda then passed out. Time passed. It wasn't until 8:57 p.m. that one of the fraternity members decided to call an ambulance. The students then drove Sonda to the hospital, but instead of placing him safely in the back seat, they deliberately placed him in the trunk to avoid dirtying the car's interior. Upon arriving at the hospital, the association members deliberately withheld important information from the medical team regarding Sonda's diet and recent alcohol consumption. After dropping him off and handing him over to the medical team, the group of students left immediately, saying that the ceremony would resume as soon as Sonda was discharged from the hospital. A decision that did not take much care of Sonda's health. While medical professionals were investigating the cause of his condition, Sonda's internal organs began to fail. He was eventually transferred to Antwerp University Hospital for more advanced care and better facilities. There, he fell into a coma, and Sonda's heart stopped, and the 20-year-old tragically passed away. The cause of death was determined to be high levels of sodium in his body due to his excessive consumption of fish sauce during the ritual. This prompted the hospital to notify the police, who immediately opened an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Sonda's death. As news of Sonda's death spread, 2 other ritual participants were rushed to the hospital at 10:40 p.m. after their conditions worsened. Their parents also rushed to the hospital upon learning of their child's serious condition. Meanwhile, the members of the cult attempted to cover their tracks by destroying all evidence. They filled in a trench used in the ritual, cleaned up the room where they used ketchup and chocolate, turned on the water supply, and deleted incriminating messages, photos, and videos from their phones. However, when the police arrived, they were still able to recover the deleted data from the cult members' mobile devices. The investigation into Sonda's death has been difficult, despite the considerable amount of evidence that has been collected. The members involved belonged to powerful families whose parents quickly sought legal representation. Although the evidence linking the 18 members of the student body to Sonda's death grew stronger, the investigation dragged on and was repeatedly thwarted by powerful parents. All 18 students deleted their social media profiles and limited their communication, speaking only through their lawyers. Following Sonda's tragic death, the Ryuzgam student body was eventually dissolved, and the university disciplined the students involved, requiring them to complete 30 hours of community service. Despite the severity of the incident, none of the students were expelled. The group of 18 completed their studies without any significant consequences. A group of teachers protested the lenient punishment, writing an open letter in support of harsher punishments for the group, but no additional measures were taken against the students. The legal process of the case was completed in July 2020. However, the lawyers for the Ryuzgam members tried to reframe the case as a tragic accident caused by Sonda's poor health. It was not until May 26, 2023, that the court finally issued its verdict. The court found 18 Ryuzgam students guilty of manslaughter and mistreatment. Each member was fined €400, ordered to perform community service, and ordered to compensate the victim's family about €30,000. The court decided not to reveal the identities of the students responsible in order to protect their future. The relatively light sentences caused widespread outrage, leading to protests in several cities. However, while these protests took place, the outcome remained the same. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rowan Ford. Rowan Ford was born on April 11, 1998, in San Diego, California. When she was young, her parents divorced, and her mother, Colleen, moved with her to a small town called Stella, Missouri. Colleen later met a man named David, and they married. Colleen already had several children from a previous marriage, and soon after their marriage, she and David had a daughter together. Rowan has 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers, and they are very close. She enjoys spending time outdoors, biking around town, swimming, and pursuing her passion for painting. She also enjoys attending Sunday school at her local church, where she often volunteers to help children who are having trouble with their homework. In November 2007, when Rowan was 9 years old, she was in 4th grade at her local elementary school. Her mother worked the night shift at a store, while her stepfather was often at the farm during the day. As a result, Rowan was often left to fend for herself, which helped her become very independent. On November 2nd, she was home alone, as usual. Colleen went to work, and her stepfather had not yet returned from the farm. The next morning, around 9 o'clock, Colleen returned home from her night shift and checked Rowan's room, but her daughter was not there. She asked her husband if he knew where Rowan was, and he told her that Rowan had asked him if she could stay the night at a friend's house. He agreed without asking the friend's name, since their town was small and he wasn't worried about her safety. Colleen felt worried and decided to ask all of Rowan's friends. Since their town only had a few streets, this didn't take long. However, none of Rowan's friends had seen her, and she had not spent the night at any of their homes. This made her mother even more anxious. Colleen searched all over town but could not find her daughter. She finally returned home and told her husband that Rowan was missing. She asked him to contact the police to report the incident, but he assured her that everything was fine and that Rowan would be home soon. After waiting for a few more hours without seeing Rowan, Colleen decided to call 911 and take matters into her own hands. The local sheriff immediately organized a search operation. He went to Colleen's house to interview David, the last person to see Rowan before she disappeared. David said that he had been working on the farm with his co-worker Christopher that evening when Nathan, a mutual friend of theirs, came to visit. They decided to go to David's house to drink and play pool. They stopped by the store to buy some alcohol before heading to David's house, where they stayed for a few hours. That night, Christopher asked Nathan to drive him to a nearby town to pick up car. They convinced David to join them to continue their party. Before leaving the house, Christopher checked to see if Rowan was asleep in her room and found her already asleep. After David left with his friends, they stopped at a store to buy more alcohol and then went to Christopher's trailer, where they continued drinking for about an hour. David then decided to go home and asked Nathan for a ride. Nathan agreed but chose to take a detour rather than the highway, as he was quite drunk and did not want to get in trouble with the police. Nathan dropped David off and drove home, while David went straight to bed. Shortly after, Rowan woke him up and asked if she could stay the night at a friend's house. Without thinking much of it, he agreed and fell asleep. The police approached the case with suspicion. What puzzled them most was that a 9-year-old girl would decide to go to a friend's house in the middle of the night, especially since her stepfather had not asked about the friend she was visiting. The police chief suspected that David might be hiding something or had something to do with Rowan's disappearance, but there was no evidence to support this suspicion. The police searched the town and the surrounding area until late at night. Locals quickly joined the search because they knew the Rowan family and wanted to help. Stella had a population of only about 150, so news of Rowan's disappearance spread rapidly throughout the area. Locals usually felt safe letting their children play outside, as there was not much going on in such a peaceful place. However, when Rowan disappeared without a trace and the police could not find her throughout the day, the people of Stella became extremely panicked. On the first day of the search, nothing was found. Then, on November 4th, the police went to the neighboring town and spoke to Christopher, who confirmed David's story. However, Christopher added that his friend had not contacted him since that evening, and he had only learned of Rowan's disappearance that same day. The police expanded the search and brought in more volunteers, but they still could not find Rowan or any clues regarding her whereabouts. The next morning, the FBI joined the investigation while local police continued to search for Rowan in the area around town. Detectives focused on the possibility of kidnapping. They strongly doubted the David story, as it seemed very suspicious. The police also checked with all of Rowan's friends and confirmed that she had not visited any of them that night. Investigators interviewed David several times, and his testimony varied in detail, further raising suspicions about his involvement. For example, he provided different times for being away that night and even stated that Rowan may not have asked him before going to visit a friend. FBI agents further discovered that on the night of her missing, David had asked his mother to lend him her car, although he had not initially disclosed this to the police. As a result, the police seized both cars for testing, but experts found no evidence. Detectives continued discussions with Christopher and Nathan, as both were with David that night. Christopher was invited to the police station and told the same story as the day before. He also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of deception. A few hours after Christopher left the station and returned to work, he saw Chief Clark's car. Christopher signaled for Chief Clark to stop. Sheriff Clark is the police chief in the town of Whitten and has known Christopher for 17 years, since Christopher was a child. Clark was a friend of Christopher's adoptive parents, and Christopher had always respected him. He often turned to him for advice or help in times of trouble. Sheriff Clark contacted Christopher, and they discussed Rowan's disappearance. Clark was aware of the case but was not directly involved, as the search was being handled by the Stella Police Department. During their conversation, Clark suspected that Christopher was withholding information, as Rowan's life was in danger and her fate was still uncertain. Therefore, Clark decided to share these suspicions with the FBI, contacting agents to explain his concerns. Investigators suspect that Christopher may be withholding important information about Rowan's disappearance, which could implicate her stepfather. It is possible that he asked Christopher to lie and alter some details in his account of the events of that night. Christopher now fears that he will be considered an accomplice if he tells the truth. Sheriff Clark informed the FBI agents that he had a good and trusting relationship with Christopher, so he wanted to help convince him to share information. That same day, Christopher went to Colleen's home to ask her about the progress of the search. Simultaneously, the FBI agents also visited Rowan's mother again. When they met with Christopher, they continued to ask him a few questions, and he once again confirmed that the events of that night happened exactly as he had described them. However, this time he also mentioned that he did not rule out the possibility that David was involved in Rowan's disappearance and expressed his desire to help them find the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. He suggested wearing a wiretap and approaching David to try to get him to confess. However, the detectives decided not to use such tactics. Instead, they asked Christopher if he could think of any locations where his friend might have hidden Rowan's body, and he suggested several places. The next day, the police began investigating these locations while continuing to search the area around Stella's house. FBI agents once again brought David in for questioning, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. Detectives also searched David's house in the hope of finding clues, but nothing was discovered. On November 7th, the police asked Christopher to return to the station to obtain his consent to search the safe in David's home. Christopher had been living with David for several months due to not having his own place, and some of his belongings were still there. Christopher gave the police permission to search the safe, his trailer, and his car. He also voluntarily provided a DNA sample and agreed to answer additional questions from the detectives. They began questioning him that evening and again asked him to confirm David's story. This time, however, Christopher suddenly admitted that his friend's story was not entirely true. The investigators began to pressure him to tell them what really happened. This pressure caused Christopher to become agitated. He said that if the police were going to treat him like a criminal and try to implicate him in Rowan's disappearance, he would not continue the conversation. The detectives then had to end the interview, and Christopher left the station. That night, he went to see Chief Clark and told him the whole story. He complained that the detectives were treating him as a suspect and said that he might need to hire a lawyer. The chief replied that it was his right, but asked him to understand that the police were only doing what they could to find Rowan. In response, Christopher stated that he would not speak to them anymore and that if he wanted to share any more information, he would only speak to Sheriff Clark. He continued to persuade Christopher to share what he knew. After a while, Christopher began to cry and said that he had always loved Rowan and would never hurt her. During his time living in David's house, Christopher developed a close relationship with Rowan and the other children. They began to consider him a member of the family and even called him Uncle Christopher. Sheriff Clark realized that Christopher was about to reveal everything he knew. However, just as Christopher was about to share, someone came to the police station, causing Sheriff Clark to temporarily lose focus. Christopher then left the office without revealing what he was about to say. Sheriff Clark eventually contacted the FBI and informed them about the conversation. He explained that Christopher was willing to share most of what he knew, but warned that if he was pressed too hard, Christopher might refuse to talk and seek legal counsel. Clark offered to give Christopher time to think it over, and the detectives agreed. The search for Rowan continued the next day without success. However, the situation changed on November 9th, a week after Rowan went missing. Search parties found Rowan's body in a remote area near a town called Powell, about 10 miles from where Stella lived. The body was covered in leaves and debris, with only a sock remaining. Medical examiners determined that Rowan had been strangled and sexually assaulted. Shortly after the body was discovered, FBI agents contacted Chief Clark and asked him to speak with Christopher again, hoping he would reveal more information. The chief learned that Christopher had come to the police station earlier that morning when Chief Clark was not there and had informed other officers that he urgently needed to see him. The chief searched everywhere for Christopher but could not find him. Christopher then contacted Chief Clark himself. He expressed obvious distress and concern that he was being followed. He explained that after hearing about the discovery of Rowan's body, he had driven around town to calm down and had noticed a gray car following him. Chief Clark claimed to be unaware of any surveillance activity and asked to meet Christopher directly. When Christopher met with the investigators, he expressed concern for his safety. He feared that after the discovery of Rowan's body, he might be charged with murder and that someone would take revenge on him. Clark took him to the police station and explained that now that the case had been ruled a murder, it was time for him to reveal everything he knew. Christopher began to cry. The sheriff asked him to tell him what David had done to Rowan. Christopher said that there were too many people at the police station and that he did not want to discuss it there. He suggested going to a quieter place and mentioned a small bridge a few miles from their town. The sheriff agreed, and they drove there together. As they got out of the car, Christopher suddenly raised his hands and asked the police to handcuff him. The sheriff was surprised and said that it was unnecessary, but Christopher insisted that after what he had said, the police had to do so. Christopher then began to recount the story he had told the police many times. He went to his trailer with Nathan and David, where they continued drinking. After a while, his friends decided to go home, and David asked Nathan to drive them. They said they would take a detour to avoid the police. However, Christopher then suddenly announced that he wanted to sexually assault Rowan and that he planned to do so. Knowing that it would take his friends a long time to take a detour through the fields, he drove straight to David's house on the main highway. He then barged into Rowan's room, picked her up, and carried her to his car, intending not to wake her. Christopher then took Rowan to his trailer, where he assaulted her. According to Christopher, Rowan had just woken up and tried to resist but was unable to escape. Christopher did not turn on the lights or talk to Rowan because he did not want her to recognize him. After committing this act, Christopher intended to take Rowan home and leave. But the plan did not go as intended. When Christopher carried Rowan out of the trailer, the moon was shining brightly, and Rowan saw Christopher's face clearly. Panicking, Christopher grabbed a rope and strangled her. When she died, he loaded her body into the car and began to think about what to do next. Initially, he wanted to throw her off the bridge, the same bridge where he stood with Sheriff Clark, but he realized her body would be found too quickly. So, he got into the driver's seat and started driving around the county, considering other options. Soon, he remembered a large pit near a neighboring town and headed there. He threw the victim's body into the pit and tried to cover it with branches, but the pit was too large to cover completely. When he returned to the car, he noticed traces of Rowan's blood on his clothes and the mattress. Christopher realized he needed to get rid of the pants, underwear, and rope used to kill the victim. He gathered all of these items and planned to put them in a large barrel to burn. However, Christopher quickly realized that such a fire would certainly attract attention, so he dragged the barrel into the shed, closed the door, and set it on fire. Sheriff Clark was surprised by this story. He had previously believed that David had committed the crime and that Christopher was just hiding some information. It was hard to believe that a man he had known for nearly 20 years could be so brutal. Christopher had 3 young children, and although he had not lived with them since his divorce, he had always seemed like a nice man. But the truth was much colder. After Christopher finished telling his story, he voluntarily went to the police station. The sheriff did not handcuff him. It was only after they arrived and the man repeated his confession to the FBI agents that he was arrested for murder. Christopher also signed a voluntary consent form to allow his trailer and car to be searched. He eventually said that he regretted his actions and cried like a baby all the next day. Investigators went to inform David that Christopher had confessed to the murder. Based on David's behavior and inconsistent statements, they suspected that he might have been protecting his friend. However, they discovered something even more shocking. When brought in for questioning, David changed his testimony of events. According to David's testimony, when he came home and found Rowan not in her room, he suspected that Christopher might have kidnapped her. So he took his mother's car and drove to Christopher's trailer. When David entered the trailer, he found her lying on the bed with Christopher. Instead of saving Rowan, David decided to join in and bully her as well. David then helped his friend dispose of the body. He stated that throughout the incident, he was shocked and could not remember anything that happened. The detectives, who were initially surprised by this incident, contacted Christopher again to confirm David's statement. However, Christopher insisted that his friend was not involved and that everything happened exactly as he had previously said. This further confused the detectives, but Christopher's statement was consistent with the facts. A medical expert confirmed that Rowan had been strangled with a thin wire, a detail that only the killer would know. During the search of the trailer, the police found a container of ashes. In addition, they found a hair in the trailer that matched Rowan's. Although investigators were unable to determine who was telling the truth, both men made accusations against one another. As a result, David was also arrested, and both cases went to trial. During the trial, Christopher requested that all of his statements be removed from the record, arguing that he did not know they could be used against him and that the police had violated his rights. However, the judge rejected this request because all of his conversations with investigators had been completely voluntary. Christopher also tried to explain the difficult circumstances of his childhood. He had experienced many family changes since he was young, which had a significant impact on his development. Christopher also saw a specialist who confirmed that he exhibited signs of developmental problems but could not help him avoid punishment. In 2012, 5 years after the murder, he was sentenced to death. He attempted to appeal the conviction but was unsuccessful. For David, the situation was much more complicated. He admitted to attacking and killing Rowan, but his testimony contradicted Christopher's. If the prosecution decided to charge David with murder, Christopher's conviction would likely be overturned, and David could also evade responsibility because there was no solid evidence against him, such as DNA. The prosecution could not afford to make such a risky claim. In fact, they were still uncertain about David's involvement in the case. They did not rule out the possibility that David had committed the crime alongside Christopher, but there was no evidence to support this theory. In the end, a difficult decision was made. To avoid the risk of overturning Christopher's conviction, they reduced David's charges to significantly lesser ones. David pleaded guilty to 2 counts, child endangerment and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison, with a minimum of 5 years to serve.